what?
He's like a hippie.
Why would you go after this guy?
It's a weekend, yeah.
Come on!
Why would you go after this guy?
There's a reason what?
Why would you go after this guy?
He's like, hey man, want a flower?
Why would you go after this guy?
There's a reason what?
He's like a hippie.
Why would you go after this guy?
It's a weekend, yeah.
Come on!
Why would you go after this guy?
There's a reason what?
Why would you go after this guy?
He's like, hey man, want a flower?
Why would you go after this guy?
There's a reason what?
He's like a hippie.
Why would you go after this guy?
It's a weekend, yeah.
Come on!
Why would you go after this guy?
There's a reason what?
Why would you go after this guy?
He's like, hey man, want a flower?
Why would you go after this guy?
There's a reason what?
He's like a hippie.
Why would you go after this guy?
All right. We are live. Instead of starting 5 minutes late, we decided to start 5 minutes early for once because we're starting at a later hour. And Mary and I have stuff to do later in the day. We said, let's jump right on it. Let's get started. So welcome, everyone. Welcome back to Reasoned Answers. Your home for the
crackhead clown individuals.
Had the why would you go after this guy introduction there today, because apparently we need to answer this question yet again. Why would we go after, quote unquote, go after Jay Smith? Dr. Kufarphobia says, I'm all for criticism, man, but you guys love Jay. LOL, I don't agree with everything he says. He also said that Jay is living rent-free in our heads. And in fact, we have not gone after Jay Smith as a person, as an individual. We've simply criticized some arguments he makes, barely even referencing him, in fact. As Dr. Kufarphobia says, I've seen multiple live streams where you mentioned his name. Yeah, we mentioned his name because he's the person making these arguments. What we're really going after is the argument. Jay is a great guy from a personal level. He's very charismatic, great storyteller, has a true heart for the gospel, a true heart for evangelism. Unfortunately, he's making wrong arguments that play into the hand of atheists and other critics of Christianity who want to say there's no such thing as true Christianity. There's just a bunch of different competing ideas lingering on for centuries after the time of Christ. And over a very long period of time, eventually orthodoxy comes to be because there, of course, is no true religion. It's just human beings deciding what is the truth. So in addition to being false, which is good enough a reason to post something, by the way, it doesn't matter if a Christian's saying it or whatever. If something is false, as a Christian, we stand for the truth. Jesus is the truth. Something being false is a good enough reason to criticize it. But in addition to that, it's also a dangerous anti-Christian argument that Jay is making, not intentionally. I'm not saying like he's a heretic or he's intentionally aiding the enemies of Christianity, but he is, in fact, doing that accidentally with his arguments. Dr. Kufarphobia says, I love the thumbnail. What do you use? So Photoshop for the most part, including on this one. Welcome back, Mary. What would you like to say as introduction?
Hello. I would like to emphasize that I have been in disagreement with the ideas of Jay Smith since he began expressing them, since I became aware of them, but they have become dangerous and highly unhelpful, and just clearly, like, people can have disagreements about information, but at this point, things that he is teaching people to say are clearly untrue. So if there's an issue that's just a disagreement of interpretation, then I'm not going to go and tell people that they can't have that opinion. It's a different disagreement of interpretation. But when you're mishandling the information itself, that is extremely harmful, and we should not be doing that as Christians.
Mm-hmm. A couple little notes here before we dive into today's topic. Are we going to get a debate review of the debate tomorrow? Absolutely. Mary and I are planning on reviewing the debate between Jay Smith and Raymond Ibrahim on the question of, did Muhammad exist? Starting on Friday. Depending on the debate, it may take multiple sessions to go through it, but at least starting our debate review on Friday. The debate itself is tomorrow, 3 o'clock Eastern time. So the exact same time this stream is starting tomorrow. So 24 hours from now is when the debate is taking place over on DCCI. Definitely will be watching that, and I definitely encourage others to watch that as well. We're going to see how the debate goes. All right. We're going to give Jay a chance to recover from it. That's not like an accusation that he's going to like be destroyed or something. Just doing a debate requires effort, requires time. So we're going to give him a little bit of time to relax, but then we're going to challenge him to a debate as well. Other thing, I hope to have out a video by Mary on the early Islamic coins today. She had some changes that she wanted to be made. I did not have time to make those last night, so that will be out tomorrow morning. It'll be your warm-up. It'll be your warm-up for the debate. It'll be out tomorrow morning. I would say that Jay's favorite argument is the coins. I think that a lot of what he says actually is just based on his interpretation of a singular coin, and then everything else he reads in light of that. That being his favorite topic, we'll have a video on that. But his second favorite topic, I think, is probably the Sanaa Manuscript, which is what we're going to be talking today. We're going to be asking what is in this document. There's a lot of information floating around out there. You got Muslims making very strong claims about how this is proof of word for word proof of the Quran, that there's never been any textual variants ever. And then you got Jay Smith over there saying it's just 63 verses long, and in those 63 verses there's 70 variants between it and the 1924 Hafs edition. We're going to see what the reality is here today. Your thoughts on the Sanaa Manuscript before we dive into your presentation, Mary?
Yeah, I find that there is a great deal of confusion about what's in it and a great deal of misunderstanding about what's in it. And unfortunately, I believe that a lot of people have gotten their information about it from Jay, and it's incorrect. So I am ready to jump in if you are.
All right. We won't keep you waiting. Jump right into the presentation here.
All right. So the question is, what is in the Sanaa Palimpsest? Like, what is it? What exists in it? What survives in it? So these are the verses that are in it. The ones that there's one section where like part of it can't be told where it ends. There's a question right there. 243 to question. Some of these have verses where you can't read every word, but still you can tell that, it's this verse. And so it is a substantial portion of the Quran. My calculation is about a fifth. There can be some arguments for a little bit less, but not a huge amount less. And as people have done more work on it, they've been able to recover more verses because, of course, the traces sometimes are very faint. And so the more work that you do on it, the more can be recovered from it.
Perhaps you should take a step back and explain what we're actually talking about, because maybe not everyone knows what you're referring to here with the Sanaa Manuscript or Palimpsest, because those two terms are kind of used interchangeably, but of course they're not actually the same thing. And so what are we talking about, Mary?
Well, we're gonna go deeper into it in a moment with details about where it was found and everything else. But this is a very brief overview of what it is before we dive in deep. And we'll have this particular slide again. There are sections of 35 different surahs, and there was a book that was the first book that was published on it. There are a number of articles. The first book that was published on it included one person's translation of the ones that she had. So these are the ones here are on 42 sheets, front and back. A sheet is also called a folio. Folio is just a fancy word for a sheet. So it has two pages. 4 more have been found since then because this is a backward third world country. Of course, they smuggle out their antiquities and sell them on the black market. And so 4 more appeared from the black market. So
really briefly
Mhm.
there, you'll get into the details of it in a second, but basically this is a manuscript that was discovered in pretty recent times, like within the last 20 years was discovered. And there are 2 texts on it. There is a, surface level text that is a fairly standard Quran manuscript. And then this turns out to be a reused piece of paper, basically, which is very common in ancient
parchment.
documents, because parchment is a very valuable resource, very expensive. Writing starts to fade, for example, right? There might be other reasons, but writing starts to fade. It's barely usable. Go ahead and just erase off what's left and then write over it. But because
Yes.
of the minerals used in the dyes, over time, that ink has reappeared, and especially can be seen under ultraviolet light. So we're primarily talking about the undertext today,
Right.
what was originally written before it was erased and rewritten.
And the palimpsest means the underwriting. So
Mhm.
this woman named Asma Halali, she wrote the first complete book about it. There are other articles that are potentially more important. And J. Smith owns this book. This is a description of her book. So it says that it consists of 38 leaves of parchment, the palimpsest. So this is the under text of one particular manuscript is on 38 leaves of parchment that she had access to. And when describing her book, she talks about this source talks about what it is. The Sanaa Palimpsest takes its name from the city, and this is a review of her book or a summary of her book that talks about what her book is and what it talks about. It takes its name from the city in which it was discovered, Sanaa, Yemen. It is a parchment of 38 leaves discovered in the false ceiling of the Great Mosque of Sanaa and has been an object of interest since its discovery. Being a palimpsest, literally meaning scraped, means that it is a manuscript containing 2 superimposed texts, one on top of the other. The lower one is the one that was scraped off. The lower layer of the Sanaa is an older version of the Quran from the 7th century CE, so approximately the 7th century CE, which was eventually erased, with the same parchment being reused for an alternative upper Quran text of a later date. Approximately 8th century CE, according to this summary. Part 2, however, of Halali's book is a monumental work in which Halali provides an annotated Arabic edition of the Sanaa Palimpsest, both the lower and upper text on the right-hand side of the page, with line-by-line critical notes on the left, noting key scribal changes. This is, of course, what makes this volume so significant. To see for ourselves, potentially pre-Uthmanic version of the Quran, and the process of change to the text since then makes the volume invaluable for anyone interested in Quranic studies. Although an annotated edition is in Arabic without translation, the critical notes do provide the transliterations of the Arabic of these texts, which also note when the Sanaa text differs from the later Cairo manuscript. So the differing is not between lower and upper text. The differing is between Sanaa and Hafs. Okay? This again allows us to see with our own eyes modern Hafs. The development and changes to the text of the Quran that have taken place throughout its transmission history. So again, she translated what she could make out of this entire list, minus 4 sheets of paper because she didn't have them, or parchment because she didn't have them. So what she could make out of this list. So how many verses do you guys think she had? The total of this is about 1,200.
I mean, I'm going to guess. I do know that some of the verses were covered after her work, but I'm going to guess at least like 600 or something.
All right. Well,
and it is just a guess. I didn't actually look up the answer.
That would be in the correct order of magnitude. Let's put it that way. It is in the well over 500. I think about 800 at that point. She was able to make out enough to give her own translation at that time. But let's see how J. Smith presents this. If this is like weird, you like hundreds and hundreds of verses, why might you be confused about the number of verses? So let's go ahead and see what J. Smith has to say about this.
I'll play Jay just in just a second. Just wanted to real quickly answer this question, since it was about what I was talking about earlier, what debate is tomorrow. So that is, did Muhammad exist, or did the Muhammad of Islam exist? Jay Smith versus Raymond Ibrahim on DCCI channel, and I'll put a link to that in the description, or sorry, not the description, in the live chat as well. And then we got this interesting comment from Cargo Crew. Don't forget the Dead Sea Scrolls magically appeared just before Israel was formed in 1950. I mean, if you're going to just spout crazy conspiracy theories based on a coincidence, then then you fit right in with a Muhammad mythist. Because there is zero chance that someone could forge the Dead Sea Scrolls. There has been extensive research on those, and they didn't just magically appear. A boy searching for documents. Well, so he originally was just playing around, and then discovered something in the cave, and he's like, hey, I could probably sell this and make some money. It wasn't like some magic thing, but that some Jewish people created them in 1945, hid them in the cave, told the boy to go search for them, and then they fooled everyone into thinking these are actually ancient documents, and therefore they justified the creation of Israel, which had absolutely nothing to do with the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Got it. All right, let's get Jay. Hopefully Jay's a little bit less unhinged than such a conspiracy theory as that. All right, let's share Mary, share my screen. Share my screen. There we go. First time it just came up as black.
This first one was just like 2 weeks ago when Mel dragged Jay out to go and make him feel better about my big mean going through the actual sources. So they got to reassure one another that they are totally on the right track here. So he's about to explain why the Sanaa Palimpsest makes no sense.
And for Paul, Hatun is the moderator. She will be neutral in the debate. Her personal position is not clear to me, but it's also relevant because she's a neutral moderator for that. All right, we got Mel and Jay. Well, really, Mel's on the screen, but we're really looking at what Jay is saying from 2 weeks ago, or 1 week ago, maybe even.
The lower layer is only 63 verses. And in those 63 verses, when compared with the upper layer, the same verses, there are 70 manuscript variants. It doesn't agree 70 times.
Does that seem like the number of verses that we actually have?
No, but maybe he misspoke. Mary. Shall we go to another clip and see?
Yes, we should go to the next one.
Here he's looking at Hilali, not the Hilali Khan, it's what's her name? Asma Hilali's book that he puts up there, and he puts it and he looks and he says the bottom palimpsest because he knows that there are 63 verses in the bottom layer from this book that was just published 2 years ago.
Wait a minute. So he's like actually has the book in his hand, and he's telling me that in this book there's only 63 verses.
When there are hundreds, yes. There are hundreds of verses that she transcribes in the book that he is holding in his hands. So he has no reason to say it's 63 verses. He's flipping through it as he speaks to show how well he knows this, while claiming that, in this case, Shabir Ali knows that there are only 63 verses. This is a problem.
So President says to be generous, does he mean on a single page?
No.
No.
He means total.
He repeatedly gives
well, let's play
this line. But
yep.
Yeah.
And
we got some more clips.
Explicitly, there are 63 verses. Those mere 63 verses have 70 variants. And so it is not the Quran as it doesn't, it barely resembles the Quran as we know it. So,
all right, next one.
What we have found. Really what we're talking about are 63 verses. That's all we're talking about, 63 verses. But when you look at the 63 verses, there are 70 variants there. 70 difference between the lower and the upper text. We're just talking about the lower and the upper text. There are verbs and nouns 25 times. They have different verbs and nouns 25 times. They have articles, participles, conjunctions that are different, prepositions, isolated letters 29 times where you see these instances, as well as expressions. Entire sentences are different, 16 times where entire sentences are different. Some overlap within the same verse.
So we got on a prepared slide here, 63 verses, 70 variants. He goes into some detail about those variants.
And I have no idea what he means by entire sentences. I think he means like phrases times within the sentence, but that turns into an entire sentence whenever he puts it on a slide, because that's just not accurate.
Some overlap within the same verses. How could the if it's an entire sentence, how could it be the same verse? He must mean a phrase, right? Or a word. So like verbs or nouns, it would be like a plural instead of a singular, or
I think
second person verb instead of a first person verb, preposition, isolated letters. So, letters could be spellings, prepositions. I mean, Arabic works differently than English, but very easy to put to instead of or something in English. So entire sentences probably means one or more words that are just the whole word is either missing or added or different. I think is probably what he really means by sentences. All right, next.
There are only 63 verses in that lower text. Within those 63 verses, they have found 70 variants.
And
they're only 63.
But again, he says only 63, but it is she has found. This is from Halali. This is no one else. It's not his sin sifters who found these. It's Halali.
Yep. Entire sentences versus half sentence. Yeah, I mean, it's impossible that there could be multiple in the same sentence if it's an entire sentence.
Yeah.
So like Mary said, we're not quite sure what he means, but we think he probably means a whole word, really.
Yep.
In the lower text, we're talking not about a full Quran. We're only talking about 63 verses. That's all that there is.
Right. That's all that there is, 63 verses. And then Al-Fadi says, right. Wow. Sorry, Al-Fadi, that's not right.
No, it's not right. And Al-Fadi knows that that's not right because he's was doing his master's thesis on this. So I don't know why he says this. This is very disturbing. Let's keep going.
Yep, keep going.
Walk through.
That's because the name that actually Elizabeth Quinn gives to them, or variants. That's the name that Sadeghi and Godarzi gives to them. So she quotes both of them and says there are these variants in the lower tier. She admits that 70 of them, 70 variants in 63 verses, which are variant from the Hafs text that we're using today, the 1924. I have it right here. This text.
So variants are with Hafs.
He is correct with variants with Hafs this time. He gets really confused about that too. But
over and over again, 70 variants, 63 verses. And he's sometimes saying explicitly, other times implying that this is the entirety of the text.
I'm not going to unpack every one of them. These are the ones we're debating. I did a debate on these 6 manuscripts in 2014 with the world's leading scholar, Dr. Shabir Ali. He could not answer one question because he'd never looked at these manuscripts. I have 3 of them, the facsimiles of 3 of them in my office. We're looking at them. Folks, do you notice what we have found? No 2 of these manuscripts are from the 7th century. They're from the 8th, 9th, and 10th century. No 2 are alike. And they don't agree with the Quran we have today. The best one, the top copy, which is about 99%, has 2,270 manuscript variants. When you look at the Sanaa manuscript, it has 2 different layers of letters, and there are 63 verses in the lower layer. It has 70 variants just within those 63 verses.
So get a little more context there, talking about some other manuscripts, his debate with Shabir Ali. Now, I mean, Shabir Ali was a disaster in that debate.
Yes.
But to say that he couldn't answer anything is a bit of an exaggeration.
Well, calling him a leading scholar of manuscript historicity is ridiculous. He has absolutely no expertise in that whatsoever.
Mhm.
Like that's
Yeah, he was not well prepared for that debate. Now, Shabir is an expert at debating.
he's an
and
expert at debating.
in some sense, he's a leading Muslim apologist, not
in
among
Islam,
Muslims,
right.
but to the West, maybe, yes. But he's not an expert on manuscripts by any means.
Correct. He is not an expert on manuscripts, but also he says no 2 are from the 7th century. Because guess what? 1 is. And even Jay says that it is sometimes. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it is. But notice he claims that it's rewritten in 705. So when's the lower text from? Before 705.
Before 705, so
right. And
now,
there's
I mean, to
you
say it's
only got-
rewritten in 705, I mean, that's
Yeah.
pretty outrageous to put a manuscript to such a precise date.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he is the one who is putting it to that precise date. It's not.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That itself is a ridiculous claim. That's
And
exactly 705.
Puin is it's Jared Puin, isn't it? Not Elizabeth? Yeah, it's man. I don't know where Elizabeth came from. Anyway,
Yeah, so Dr. Kufarphobia here says he may be confusing with Birmingham, but Sanaa has way more than 63 verses. He is wrong. Yes, exactly. So Birmingham does have 63 verses. There are a couple times where he says 61 and then corrects himself to 63. So what Halal actually said is that there's 61 significant variants. I don't know how he's confusing the numbers, but this is his prepared slide.
Correct.
He's giving it at lecture after lecture. It's not just off the top of his head. He misremembered things. So I don't know how he came to the confusion, but however he came to it, he has repeated it over and over again. Very sloppy, to say the least.
And he has the book. He was looking at the book. He should know how big that section is in the book, for heaven's sake.
Yeah.
This is why the earliest Quranic texts are on the Dome of the Rock, 691. The earliest Quranic manuscripts begin to appear during his reign. The lower text, remember I showed you the Palimpsest of Sanaa? That lower text probably comes from the last 2 decades, the time Abdul Malik was in power. And you notice it is only 63 verses. There are 70 variants in just those 63 verses.
What would the last 2 decades of the 7th century be? Just out of curiosity.
The 7th century, and here he decides that it was made up in 691 and then rewritten in 70.
No, that's the Dome of the Rock. And the reason I said that is because that'd be he's placing it between 680 and 700, while also confidently asserting that the Dome of the Rock comes first.
Yeah.
Because he attributes that to.
But he does say late 7th century right there in bold text. While just before saying we have nothing from the 7th century, now he's saying it is from the 7th century, and he's still saying it's 63 verses and there are 70 variants, and he will say this over and over again.
Let's continue.
What she says is basically what has been echoed by not only Dr. Gary Quinn and Elizabeth Quinn, who've done the most work on this, but also Sadeghi and M. Gudarzi, and also then Elizabeth Quinn. They all agree that there are more variants in the lower text than in the upper text.
Okay, that's true.
But it's interesting, from her book, she says that the Sanaa Palimpsest is basically made up of 63 verses. The lower text has 63 verses, but it has 70 variants within those verses.
There you go. Yet again. Now, he was correct that the lower text has more variants than the upper text, but it's also way more than 63 verses. And we're not quite sure what the 70 is either. That doesn't... I'm sure he got it from somewhere, but it doesn't really seem to correspond to anything important.
Oh, now I understand how Elizabeth comes in. Elizabeth is the husband of, or this husband is the wife of Jared or Garrett or however you say his name. And she's a scholar. She did the transcription of several folios in 5 successive publications. So if he's familiar with the work of Elizabeth, he should be familiar with all of the pages that she transcribed. He ought to be familiar with that.
So Morgie says, but the Birmingham folio has only a couple pages in it. So just correction on your terminology. Birmingham manuscript folio is synonym for page. But yes, it is only a couple pages long. Yeah, not because that's all there ever was, but that's what has survived to the present time.
Right. There's some in Birmingham and some in Paris.
Yep.
So,
but it collectively still called the Birmingham manuscript.
Earliest manuscript we can find anywhere in the world. The undertext, however, is only made up of 63 verses. Yet by comparing the undertext with the upper text, there were 70 variants just between the two texts. Undertext would have been written about 690, so that's a 7th century. This is the first 7th century Quranic script we can find. Comparing it to an 8th century upper text, there are 70 variants where there are...
There you go. Same thing.
And now he's confused about whether or not it's Hoff's or the upper text it's being compared to, and he's claiming it's the upper text.
Right. Manuscript we can find anywhere in...
Right. Yeah, he did say that. He said compared. Sometimes he says compared to the upper text. Sometimes he says compared to Hoff's. The upper text is not identical to Hoff's by any means, but it's closer to it. Yeah, again, we don't really know where he's getting the number 70 from, but it's not a meaningful number, either compared to the upper text or to Hoff's. Normally, the variants would be compared to Hoff's. There'd be no reason to compare the lower to the upper text. That'd be a weird thing to do. I'm not saying no one has ever done it. It just would be kind of strange thing to do. All right, continuing.
Wow.
Muhammad died in 632. Well,
what
they
century?
start to appear in 705. That's the Petropolitanus manuscript, probably the oldest one, and the Sanaa manuscript, probably 705. Now, there's an underlayer. It's a palimpsest, so there's another layer underneath it, which is actually probably from the last 2 decades of the 7th century, the time of Abd al-Malik. But it does not agree with the upper layer. They now, at that time when I first heard this, I didn't know that no one had studied it yet. That has now just been studied, and the study has now come out in print in 2017. So we're just talking about 3 years ago. We now have found that the two layers of the manuscript don't even agree with each other. This is the lower layer. It has 63 verses with 70 different variants. I mean, words and phrases that are different than the upper layer. And
once again, now I do want to clarify the timeline. I said that it was discovered in the last 20 years. That was not completely accurate. What I meant is that the research was done in the last 20 years. It was actually discovered originally in the 1980s.
1972. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, 1972. And then they discovered it was a palimpsest really quickly. But it takes a long time to, do all the imaging to actually recover the text to say, oh, looks like there's something there. Okay, but you have to do imagery, and then someone has to spend all the time to go through it word by word, decipher what the word written is, and determine whether it's the same word, etc. It takes a lot of work. It wasn't done immediately, but it was known that there was a palimpsest. So he's wrong about that. That wasn't discovered in 2017.
Correct. And also note that he's like, it begins appearing in the 8th century. But by the way, this is from the 7th. The palimpsest, even in here, he's like, there's nothing until the 8th century, except for this palimpsest, which is what everyone's talking about.
There's nothing except for what there is.
Giving are J. Smith's dates. They're not anyone else's dates except for J. Smith's dates. These are his dates, his dating. They are not the dates of scholars. They're J. Smith's dates. And that's also significant.
Yeah. The 705, like I said, that's ridiculously precise. No one would make such a comment, especially since it's going to be dated on handwriting only, not a carbon date, since it's the upper text. And
Yeah.
unless it like said in the text, this was written in the year, whatever that would be, AH, right? Because it wouldn't say AD, obviously, or in the year of our Lord or whatever. But, you know, if it said written in the year 73 AH, then maybe you could argue it really was written in 75. But this is just his date. No one else is saying that. And likewise, they're not saying that the undertext is between 680 and 700. In fact, they're basically universally saying it's before 680. So not a consensus date by any means. All right, next one.
Lower text. There you can see a graph that she put together of what exists in the lower text and what exists in the upper text. She found that there were 63 verses in the lower text, and within those 63 verses, there were 70 variants, which include verbs and nouns, articles.
So this is actually interesting here. He said 63 verses again. He's listing them. Just eyeballing it, it looks like there's way more than 63 verses.
Yep, on that lower text already, and he is only putting in the first screenshot from the first. Would you remove the overlay for a second?
Yes.
Morg's comment.
Oh,
Morg's comment still hanging out there.
Sorry.
All right, so it goes only to 38.
Yeah,
it goes only to 38 out of the 114
pages.
But
notice that if there's an upper text, the page was not blank originally, right? They didn't just like skip over pages. Even if we're not able to recover the text, there was text written on that page, and we've recovered more since then. But I'm just eyeballing this. Like, there's 20 verses on page 24 verses on page 24. There's 50 verses on page 21. I mean, this is way more than 63 verses just on his own list.
And here's the funny thing. He only goes to 38 pages, not 38 folios. And it's
right.
So it's like not
right.
Even
As you said, there's over 100 of them in total.
Yeah.
And I imagine the book probably continues on.
Yeah. Yeah. So he has enough to create this page, and he just stops while still saying 63.
Yep.
Which surahs do we have? Well, why not just list out the surahs like I did? Why is he doing this?
Yeah, we'll get into the dating either this time or next time. I don't know which time, but we will get into the dating. But yeah, this is basically correct here that it's almost certainly before 680, even though Jay is saying it's definitely after 680.
Text. She found that there were 63 verses in the lower text, and
I forgot that we already played that. Next one.
This upper text, and there are 63 verses in that lower text that do not correspond with the 705 text above it. When they look at the 63 verses, there are 70 manuscript variants between just the two layers.
And again, he's confused about what the manuscript variants are being documented of.
Mm-hmm.
And what she has found is that there are really just 63 verses in the lower layer, the earlier script, and that there are 70 differences in just those 63 verses.
Holding up the book, pointing towards it, telling lies about what the contents of the book, telling untruths. Sorry, I don't want to accuse him of lying, but telling untruths about what's in the book again.
We can only find 63 verses in that lower text. And in those 63 verses, there are 70 variants from that, which is the 1924 canonical text that we use today.
Only 63 found.
And I'm sorry, it's only 63 verses, but there are 70 different variants in those 63 verses from the
only.
That's holding it up again. He does say 61, which is actually a relevant number, but then corrects himself to 63. But it's not that there's only 61 verses. It's like that there's 61 massive, well, maybe massive is not the best word, significant. 61 significant verses with variations.
Yeah, there's 61 verses with variants that Halali found and the several hundred verses that she had.
Yep.
not the underlayer. Look at the underlayer. It has 60 verses, 63 verses with 70 differences in those 63 verses from the upper layer.
63 verses, 70 variants.
Look at the lower text. There are 63 verses in that lower text from the late 7th century. There are 70 variants between the upper and lower text.
63 variants between the upper and lower text. Usually he says between the two rather than verse hofs. He does occasionally say hofs.
Book where she notices that there are 63 verses with 70 differences. When they put it under ultraviolet light, they can see those differences. They don't, and these
63 verses. This one is only implied that those are the only verses. He theoretically could be saying there's 63 verses that have variants, and in those there's 70. But at minimum, it would be highly deceptive not to say there's also 400 that don't have significant variants, right? Because it's making it sound like there's barely anything there, and what is there is extremely different, right? When he says it that way.
63 verses with 70 differences, 70 variants from within those 63 verses.
And one more.
Palimpsest of the Sanaa Manuscript was washed and then written over top. So if you don't like what you have written, wash it, thinking no one can see it. That bleeds through centuries later, as we're now finding. And that's why Asma Hilali now has come up with the 63 verses that have bled through.
63 verses, but notice the little story there as to why it was washed. Or they were embarrassed that it was a different text, so they washed it off. They didn't like it.
And he acts like you could use it like a dry erase board, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work to erase things written in iron gall ink, which is what this was written in. It is a lot of work. Yes, you wash some of it off, but it stained the leather. You have to scrape off parts of the leather to get rid of it. And it's a huge pain. And getting leather wet in the first place and getting it to dry nicely and everything else is already a pain. So, no.
So cargo crew with a non-sequitur here. They had all sorts of manuscripts, but they can't make a rock inscription or what? One, there are rock inscriptions. Two, that's not a normal thing to do, is go write the Quran on a rock.
Yeah. Like, imagine asking for the earliest inscription of the New Testament or even the Old Testament. It's just weird. It's a weird question.
Yep. Totally unrelated to what we're actually discussing. But you know what? Move the goalposts as much as you need to get back your position to remain viable. All right, over to you, Mary.
All right. So I wanted to emphasize that this really is what Jay is teaching and has been teaching, because there are a lot of people who will make excuses for him saying 1, 2, 3, 4, even 5 or 10 times. This is what he teaches. The most recent clip was from 2 weeks ago. He has the book. He must know what is inside it, unless he's telling people he has looked at something that he hasn't looked at. So this is quite significant. So the question is, what was found in the Sanaa? And this is an article by Ursula Dreipholz, who was the lead preservationist. She was sent by Germany over to treat the materials that were found, all of them, in a way that they can be kept from being destroyed by age or water or whatever else. So this is her article about what she was doing, and she starts out with her introduction. The west wall of the Great Mosque of Sanaa in the capital of Yemen collapsed under the impact of heavy rains in 1971. Rebuilding of the wall started the following year, and in the process, a large number of fragments from very early Quran manuscripts was brought to light from the space between the ceiling and the roof of the mosque. The number of fragments written on parchment has been estimated 12,000 to 15,000. It's a huge number. There are also many fragments written on paper. This will be significant later. If you listen to Jay Smith, he will tell you over and over again that because the Muslims were the caliphate was rich. Everything was written on parchment. We expect everything on parchment. That just isn't true. They did almost all of their governmental records would have been on papyrus or palm leaf or other things that only needed to last a certain number of years. Parchment's expensive for everyone. That's like saying that every road in the Roman Empire, it would have been paved. No, that's really expensive. Only important things were. Was it true that the Quran was the first thing that the Muslims wrote down on parchment? Yes. Does that mean that these will all survive to the present day? Absolutely not. The vast, vast majority of parchment manuscripts are completely lost to time. They get massively damaged over years of heavy use because a lot of them were produced for heavy use. That's why they're written on parchment, so they can withstand heavy use. But then you have lots of use and eventually they wear out. And that's true of everybody's parchments. The vast majority of texts that survive to the present day are written on parchments in books that are from the 900s and later. Anything before the 10th century is relatively rare because it still wears out. You still have losses. You have continual losses from the time it's created to the present time, whenever the present time is, and it's constantly moving, right? The present constantly moves forward and you have constant losses. This is the way life is. It's difficult, she says, it's difficult to even approximate the number of fragments on paper because the paper fragments are in such poor quality. Priority was given to the parchment fragments since they're the older and more important ones. Why were they older? Because anything from paper from that period doesn't survive at all. There was no time at all to work on the paper fragments during the project, and therefore the following text deals exclusively with the material on parchment. So she's talking about what she did. No written dates were found, but experts agree that most of the manuscripts are datable to the first 3 or 4 centuries after the Hijra. That is, the 7th to the 10th or 11th centuries AD. The script is mainly Kufic, although there are a number of examples written in the oldest form of the Arabic script, Hijazi. The oldest form is Hijazi, from the Hijaz, just to be clear.
Wait, the Hijazi script is from the Hijaz?
Yeah, amazing, crazy. And it's found in the Hijaz and in Yemen. That's where it's found. So, what is the earliest form of the Arabic script found in the Islamic material?
I mean, it's the Kufic script, isn't it?
Ha! Yeah, so it is a Hijazi script. Are there also paper fragments? Did the Caliphate use paper? Yeah.
I mean, the based on that description there, right, that there wasn't time to address the paper fragments, probably because it takes an extreme amount of work because they're very fragmentary, very broken apart. That would mean that, yes, there's paper fragments as part of the collection.
Yep. Did early Muslims use paper?
Well, if there is extant examples, that would have to be a yes.
Yeah. Did the earliest paper fragments survive?
I mean, almost certainly not.
No.
The earliest paper fragments of any document from ancient history haven't survived.
Yep. So she continues to say almost all the parchments contain Quranic texts. Only less than 150, that is approximately 1% of all fragments, are non-Quranic. These may be hadith, religious commentaries, even a few remnants from medical books, and some mostly fragmentary ownership documents. Close to 1,000 different volumes of the Quran have been distinguished so far. Sometimes a lonely leaf is all that is left of a volume. On the other hand, in a number of cases, a substantial part of the text block is still preserved, but in general, just a few leaves represent one book. Not one volume is complete. Are the volumes not complete because they never were complete, Thaddeus?
That would be a ridiculous assumption.
Yes, it would. Yes, it would. So, All of this raises a question why these Qurans came to such a fragmentary and dispersed state, how they came to be hidden in the roof. This is going to answer Snoopy's questions about why the heck they're here. The generally accepted view now is that the roof was not a hiding place. If it had been, one would expect to find the most valuable and complete volumes there. But books do not get scattered like this, even under the most unfavorable circumstances. You know, if it's been put away in one piece, it doesn't turn into leaves just dispersed like that. The conclusion is rather that it was a resting place for Qurans or parts of Qurans that were not used anymore. So your binding breaks apart, it's not usable, and you're not reusing the parchment because it's a huge pain and you have money for new ones. What better abode for the holy book than the sacred confines of a mosque? So if you have important documents that you don't want to throw away because they're too valuable to you, then you have the space here and you can just put them in here. And that's what happened.
That's actually very interesting. Obviously, we don't know exactly when it was stored there. I mean, it could have been, 900 or 1000 AD, but whenever it was, that would indicate probably that they already have the idea that the text is sacred and shouldn't be destroyed. An idea that, modern Muslims certainly have, that even if you give them a single verse of the Quran written in Arabic, they can't just throw that in the trash can, right? So it would imply that they already had that belief at the time they stored the documents in the attic or in the wall in the attic, however it was exactly found.
So, very, very brief aside, we have a Muslim in the chat who thinks that to be a guardian of someone means to let people break in, change, and corrupt it. That's what it means. Yeah. By the way, the only text that is used to judge other things by in the Quran is the Injil. The people of the Injil, the people of the gospel, are to judge by what was written in it. So that is the criterion. That is the supreme authority. That is that which determines what is true and what is false for Christians. That is our standard according to Allah. If Allah does not mean that, then he is a liar because he says that. So he is either telling Christians to judge by, he's obviously telling Christians to judge by that which they have, because he says it multiple times that Christians read the scripture, they have it in front of them, between their hands, and with them. And if he is telling them to judge by corruption, then that means that Allah orders people to corruption. So those are your choices. Does Allah order people to judge by something that is corrupt, or does he order people to use as their standard of judgment to determine right or wrong that which is supreme, the gospel, that is intact? It's either intact or not. You can't get away from it. That's it.
Well, maybe Muhammad bin Ishaq here will provide the answer because he doesn't have his volume on. He's trying to guess what we say. I told him he needs to prove that he has his volume on or he'll be timed out. But when his attempts to guess, he says that manuscript, so Sanaa Manuscript, matches the Quran, just simple, different wording. So it can't match and have different wording. Your statement is self-contradictory. You aren't very bright. It can't match. It could mean the same thing, but that doesn't mean it matches. Matches means it is identical. And of course, not all the wording means the same thing. Some of the textual variants are very different words that are spelled very similarly, but have completely different meanings.
And he is lying about prepositions here. He is choosing to use a preposition that in context means about, to be over, as in having authority over. That is not what the Arabic means. The Arabic says that the Quran is trustworthy about, concerning the previous scripture, but it isn't. Why not? Why isn't it trustworthy in saying what the previous scripture has in it? Because it was made up by a desert bandit. So
Yep.
if you do
And we're
not
not
say, I
discussing.
have my
we're not
volume on, I'm timing you out in
Yep.
1 minute and a half.
I gave him 3 opportunities to prove that he is engaging with us. I suspect that he does not have his volume on and he keeps trying to distract. We're not discussing the Islamic dilemma today. That will be the extent of our discussion of it for the day.
And if you
would
bring
like
up
to
the
discuss
Islamic dilemma again and try to argue in the
Yep.
comments, I'm timing your backside out.
Yep. If you would like to discuss that topic, I would love to have a discussion with you. Email me, Thaddeus@reasonanswers.com. I already put it in the description. I already put it in the chat once. It's found in the video description. I'll put it in the chat again. Email me. I'll have a discussion on whatever topic you want, including the Islamic dilemma, but we're not discussing that topic today. Any further off-topic comments will result in a timeout. All right, let's get back to the subject, Mary.
All right. So our next set of questions is every sheet or fragment a different document?
No. Now, I do believe there are multiple documents in this collection, but that doesn't mean every page is a different document.
Correct. There are over 1,000 different Quran volumes that have been identified, yet many of them do belong in groups together. Are the Qurans from 300 years after the Hijrah complete? That means the latest Qurans in this collection. Are they complete?
No.
None of them are correct. None of them are complete. Not even one.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a case where, the early ones are fragmentary because they haven't finished writing it, but these later ones, they're finished. It's not how it works. Nope, the Quran does not at all say that he's in timeout for 24 hours now because he did not turn on his volume. And the Quran does not say that Christians are at fault if they don't use the Quran. It says that Christians are to judge by the gospel. We are to judge by it. And our gospel says your book is trash. Therefore, your book is trash.
So,
all right.
Time for you to go do some research, prepare for that topic, and then email me. And we'll have a discussion on that topic when you're prepared to do it. And it's on topic for the day. Strangely, no matter what topic we're talking about, even today, where we're saying that indeed there are early Qurans, a position that Muslims would like, they want to talk about something else.
Yep. All right. So why aren't they complete? According to the conclusions of Ursula Dreibholz, or however you say it. They are not complete.
Well, I mean, based on what you already said, that this is a...
Yep.
And like, even without knowing what she specifically said, it makes sense that if you have a bunch of fragmentary copies together and you have no complete copies in the same location, that this was probably some kind of storage location for discarded versions of the Quran.
Yep. So she's talking about classifying. How the heck do you find out which belongs to which if they're all more or less approximately the same text? So she said,
that's a good question.
After she treated the papers to flatten them out, she gives a detailed description about how they flatten them out and get them all looking good, and how they briefly clean them off and everything else to get them in good shape so they can be examined. So after they're treated to get this so that you can actually read it, after they were treated so they could be handled carefully and were ready for the next step, determining their textual content. So determining the content is the next step. This part of the work, identifying which surah and ayah verse came at the beginning and end of every page or smaller fragment, was done by my Yemeni co-workers, some of whom were involved in the conservation process as well. The final step was also the first step toward cataloging the fragments. First, it was necessary to find out if a particular leaf belonged to one of those 1,000 or so established Quran volumes, or if it represented a new volume needing a new signature. For this process, it was necessary to rely on a few obvious criteria which could be identified quickly. The first director of the project here in the Sanaa developed a system in which the lines on a page were counted and their length measured. These two numbers constitute the first two numbers of the signature of a specific volume of the Quran, because in general, Qurans will have, if it's a well-written book, it always has the same number of lines. A lot of these are not well-written books, so they have variant number of lines, but at least the width of text on each page will stay the same, because the pages are the same size and you try to keep consistent margins. So at least that much stays consistent. So
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but you probably wouldn't break a word across a line, or maybe you would.
No, you wouldn't. But they're giving kind of like the max.
But yeah, I mean, you got a couple characters variants, right?
And people would squeeze. People absolutely squeezed at the end of lines. They just go and just shorten that word
to make it more aesthetically pleasing, to get the column very even.
The edges, the margins are heavily there because, like, you have rodent problems in the ancient world, and you don't want to lose part of your manuscript because a mouse chews on the edges of your book. So you've really tried to
I mean, your fingers too, right? Your fingers could damage the edge of the book.
Right.
I mean, modern books the text doesn't go all the way to the edge of the page. So I mean, that just makes sense. So you wouldn't expect it to.
Yeah. So here's our example. For example, 12-20 means that there are 16 lines to a page and the lines were not longer than 20 centimeters. Of course, there may be several Qurans with these same criteria, distinguished from each other by a different script, format, etc. For each of these, an individual number was added to the end of the signature, 16-20.1.2, etc. In those cases where the number of lines on a page was inconsistent within a volume, the first number of the signature was always 01. Thus, 01-17.3 indicates the third codex with a changing number of lines no longer than 17 centimeters. The range of the number of lines was marked separately. It was thought too confusing and too cumbersome to include them in the signature. For example, 12, 16 to 14 to 16, 19, 20 shows that there were pages with 12 lines, none with 13, again with 14 to 16, none with 17 or 18, and some with 19. So that's why it's always 01, because otherwise it would just end up being a disaster. Where either the number of lines or their length could not be established, the appropriate symbol 00 was used. Therefore, 00-15.1 describes a fragment torn horizontally on which the lines could not be counted, but with the existing lines not longer than 15 centimeters. Finally, this is the first example with these particular specs. She says area, but she means specs. In contrast, 15-00.4 designates a leaf torn vertically. It is clear that there are 15 lines on the page, but whose length cannot be measured. And finally, this is the fourth such case. So
lots of technical details, but basically handwriting analysis, or the habits of the scribe analysis. If it's a different scribe, it's a different work.
Well, not necessarily. Not
always. Not all.
The general handwriting style, and the because you won't have like huge print and small print, Kufic with whatever. But in general, the size of the page, the number of lines per page are most often helpful if it's a better written script or book. If it's a less well-written book, then you'll have more variants.
And then once you've determined, which ones go together, then you can put them in order based on, the last word on one page and the first word on another. Lots of puzzle solving, basically, is going on here. It's not trivial. You don't just pick up a stack of paper and you automatically know what it is.
Yep.
And again, research that took place over multiple years.
Yeah. So if you are framing this poorly or deceptively, you could trick your audience in various ways. You can confuse the different manuscripts and pretend they're all from one manuscript. You can say, hey, we have all this text, and pretend that it's all the same manuscript, so they all count for each other. Oop, guess it easy.
Well,
there we go. Sorry. You could pretend that different parts of one manuscript are from several manuscripts. You can be like, oh, we have this page here and that page here, and they're just all different manuscripts. They're all scattered. They're all different. That's not legitimate either. You have to distinguish which manuscript is which. You can switch between the two according to what is most convenient, which is the most irritating. So you need to be clear and honest about how much is what. When we say the Sanaa Palimpsest, we're talking about one particular manuscript. Though there might be other palimpsest in the material somewhere, we're talking about one. And it's always about the one manuscript. So you can't go, oh, but lots of things were found there. No, we're talking about one particular manuscript out of the finds. So,
and those the other manuscripts, you know, they have value to textual criticism and understanding the development of the Quranic text or whatever, but they're far less important than the one particular super early text that we are talking about.
And people care about this one because A, it's very early, and B, it's a very large chunk of the Quran, right? So when people say Sanaa manuscript, what is meant? They mean Sanaa, what is called Sanaa 1 or DAM01, variable number of lines per page, dash 27, no more than 27 centimeters across, .1, the first one that was discovered of this. This is the substantial portion of the Quran that contains an even earlier lower text beneath it that was erased. The erased material, which is the palimpsest, is able to be recovered using modern methods like UV. It is a pre-Uthmanic text and is overwritten by an Uthman-like text. So, by Uthmanic, scholars are not endorsing the view that this necessarily comes from Uthman, but it belongs to the family of texts that are identified as Uthmanic. Okay? To be clear. The Uthmanic texts have the same surah order. How can you tell the difference?
Hold on. Just a quick pause. Protestant Bleeder said palimpsest equals text over washed out text. No, it's the other way around. The palimpsest is the original text.
Correct. Right. The palimpsest is a text under. So we're talking about the lower text. So
I would not say 22% is a large number. Okay. You have no idea about ancient manuscripts.
You have no clue about ancient manuscripts.
That's a small piece.
That is a phenomenal find within the first 100 years of something that was first created in the 7th century. It is an incredible percentage. It's
22% of the Quran, just to be clear.
Oh, it isn't. It isn't actually 22%. Actually. Rounding up, it's 21%.
Yeah,
I will say roughly a fifth is what I would say.
Yep. Now, to be clear, there probably was text on an undertext on some of the pages that we have that we're not able to recover the undertext. So we probably technically have more than 20% of the original, but 20% where we can make out the words, right?
Yeah. These are the where you're able to make out what verse this is, basically.
Yeah.
All right. So how do we tell the difference between Uthmanic text and pre-Uthmanic text? The Uthmanic texts, they have the same surah order as all modern Qurans. They also don't have extra surah like Ubay's text, or if you can tell, lack of surah like Ibn Masud. There's no evidence of this in the Sanaa Palimpsest, but the very edges, like even with those versions, they would have been in the parts that were most subject to damage at the very beginning or at the very end. So you can't tell. It's not possible to tell. At this point, the lack of evidence is not evidence of absence. In this particular case, we cannot know whether or not it conformed to one of those two standards rather than the traditional one. Does it only have 112 surahs or does it have 117? We don't know. So, or 111.
Right. Obviously,
we don't know.
We don't have the whole thing, and we don't have. Obviously, if it had less, there's no way to know whether we just don't have that page or I never had it. but we don't have any text from some of the potential additional surahs.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean they weren't there.
And the third way to tell is if it more or less matches the Uthmanic rasam that is considered to be Uthmanic today. Now, that said, none of the Uthmanic type texts that we have perfectly match the rasam. They're just extraordinarily similar. They're more similar than anybody else's. But if it's very, 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 very close to the rasam, then we say it's Uthmanic as well. That's the third one, which I didn't put there, which I should have. Now, there are other Hijazi.
Yeah, probably you definitely should have, since it's probably the most important, practically speaking. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, no, the most obvious is a surah order.
Yeah. That's why I said practically speaking, because. Right. So in some cases, right, there might be surahs in different order in a manuscript, but often you're going to be talking about a small fragment of it, 4 pages or something. So you're not going to be able to determine surah order, but you could look at the text and say that the text is different enough that I'm confident this isn't in the same textual history family.
Right. Now, there are 2 more that have been identified as being Hijazi and not later Kufic, or there's another style as well that's later. So there are 2 that have been specifically identified, but they're way more fragmentary, and we're not talking about them. We're talking about the one that you have a substantial portion of it, so you can say much more about what's in the whole. So what is it? A codex is a single bound book. You can have today ebooks, hardbacks, paperbacks, scrolls. Paperbacks and hardbacks would be types of codices if they're handwritten. A codex can potentially bind together various material. You can choose to trim stuff from different sources to the same size and bind them together. But all the codices here are being referred to as codices because they have been identified as being part of one continuous work. Now, the earlier work on this said that the Sanaa manuscript was done by one scribe, but the most recent publication, someone was able to distinguish between the works of 2 scribes that have incredibly similar handwriting. What they would do is that they would have a model text, and from this model text, they would copy a page identically to that model text. And then scribe number 1 would set it aside and immediately start working on the next page, the same side of it. So the same scribe wouldn't flip it over. And then after it dried a moment, scribe number 2 would have it and flip it over. So you could have scribe number 1 finish a page, set it aside. Scribe number 1 finish a page, put that in the last place. Scribe number 2 takes the first page or first sheet, flips it over, writes on the back. So you have 2 sides being written on at once and one side drawing on its own. And so you're more efficient and you're working faster. You don't have to wait for the page to dry to flip it to continue the work. And that's only possible if you guys have an exemplar that you're working off of, because you know how much to skip to start the front of the next page. That's really significant, because what does that mean? The Sanaa Palimpsest is not an original composition. It is a copy of something else. So it's not the earliest. It is copying something even earlier that has not survived. Maybe it wasn't on parchment. Maybe it just rotted, which is the most likely.
I mean, 99.99% or something like that of all ancient writing doesn't survive to the modern times. So,
right. And it's very,
we don't need to come up with some explanation why we don't have it, but it's copied.
Right. And the fact is that it's very large. And you didn't usually, like, if you're going to have something that's impressively large, it's typically for public group use or something like that. And it would be in parchment. You don't really bother to make big books in papyrus. It just doesn't make sense because it's not for the use case. So it was almost certainly an earlier parchment book. Let me laugh at the dog 1 second.
Yep. Let me take some comments from the audience while you're doing that. Cargo Crew said there's much more evidence of dinosaurs who lived 160 million years ago. Go show me all the manuscripts that the dinosaurs wrote. Show me all the evidence of the dinosaur civilizations. You're comparing paleontology, which is about the discovery of species, to history, which is about human activity, and you think this is a relevant comparison.
That's very
right?
goofy.
Yeah. You like to make the most ridiculous comparisons to try to justify your mythist ideas, and this comment is a great example of it. Speaking to someone else, but I'm going to say it was addressed to me. So you must concede that a figure like Muhammad needs the utmost scrutiny. So why is Thaddeus and Mary jumping the gun at every opportunity to give the benefit of the doubt to Islamic history? We aren't. What are you talking about? This is insane. This is an insane accusation that we are just assuming that the things are in line with Islamic history. If that is actually what you get from these lectures, from these teachings, then you are not absorbing anything.
Yep.
What we are saying.
And
I don't think that's actually the case. I think you actually are hearing what we're saying. You actually are engaging in some way, but you're just blocking it out and making these ridiculous reasons in your mind to not accept what we're saying.
Yep. And if you want to know where the stones and bones are, the bones have disintegrated. They were eaten by other critters because they were discarded as soon as it was put onto parchment. Now, one thing that's
forget that, Mary. Forget that,
yeah.
Right? So he says that we should have dinosaur-like proof. Okay, let's say we dug up some human bones from the 7th century. What exactly would that tell you?
Yeah, I mean, we have.
What do you think that's going to tell you? That human beings existed in the 7th century?
Yeah.
Okay. Does that have anything to do with whether Islam existed or not? Of course.
And here's the thing: Jay Smith is the only person in the world who is saying that there are no people in Central Arabia. He's it. Everybody else knows that there are people there. Everybody else knows that there are Bedouins there. Everybody else knows that there are tribes there. He just says that there aren't because it sounds good. Are there large cities? No. Even Medina probably had like 3,000 people in it, and it was the biggest one in that central area. There was a larger city way out, actually, in the empty quarter that was a caravan center, but it was abandoned in the 5th century. And there were a number of other, a huge number of small villages, very small villages scattered around in various places. They existed. They were real. People lived there. And there are Bedouins to this day wandering around, feeding their herds in the Hijaz mountains. It's less popular now because it's a miserable, pathetic, scratching, barely subsistence lifestyle. So there are very few people doing it these days because they have better alternatives. But to this day, people are living a Bedouin lifestyle in the Hijaz. They exist. They live there. So
So just to summarize, archaeology can tell you where people lived, to some extent how they lived, maybe even about their diet. It can't tell you what they believed. It just can't. Nor can it tell you about historical events. It doesn't do that. That's not the purpose of archaeology. You're trying to apply, well, then you're comparing it to paleontology, which is different than archaeology.
Yes.
But you're trying to compare unrelated fields and saying, because we don't have bones that say this is the bone of Muhammad, he didn't exist. I mean, come on, be serious. Be
that's
serious.
Very goofy. Anyway, so I explained how the Sanaa was produced with one person writing on one side, one person writing the other, which indicates that, in fact, they were copying from a model. Later, the whole book was erased, and the whole book was written over again with an Uthmanic text. The second book was written less densely, so additional pages were added to it. There's just less text per page. on average. And so additional pages had to be added to write the same stuff. So it was a whole book before, it was also a whole book afterwards. Because the upper text does conform to the Uthman type text, we can use that to figure out which pages were added away without making any assumptions about the lost content of the lower text. That means that we know what order the surahs are in, so we can figure that out. So, Eleanor Szilard, if that's how you say her name, she is French. She was she has done the most recent work on the number of writers, how it was produced, and also in visualizing, basically reconstructing how it had existed as a physical text. And she says that it is worth noting that in 7 observed occurrences, the changing of hand does not necessarily coincide with the end of a verse, but often occurs within a verse. Consequently, such a habit could imply copying from a written exemplar rather than via dictation, in which case one would not expect copyists to relay to each other in the middle of a textual unit. So if it was from dictation, then you expect that one person is standing there, finishing up a verse, and then it would go to the next person to recite the next set of verses or whatever. In any event, this practice, which seems to be well-known, a well-known scribal rule within the Hijazi manuscripts, she's saying, are normally one side, one person, one side, another person, requires further study. An irresponsible view is what we have now is all that there was. That is just irresponsible. It is not the way anyone who is dealing in a historically responsible manner would ever react to this. It is not it's not logical, sensible, makes not supportable. Szilard also
Oh my goodness. Sorry. Cargo Crew says, even dinosaur extinction theories are synthesized using same principles, which Mel and Robert Spencer are working.
Absolutely not.
Oh my goodness gracious. This is the most ridiculous comment you've ever made on this channel.
Absolutely not. If I were doing it the way Mel is doing it, I would say that aliens came and shot them all. That is the level, because I saw a painting from a caveman. So aliens came and shot all the dinosaurs. That's the level of thinking.
Yeah. That's actually very good. The ancient alien stuff is exactly the same methodology that Mel uses.
It is identical to the method that Mel uses. So what is a choir? So when you have the old style sewn codices, hardback books even, if you look on the side, you will see that the pages have been folded in sections. And then each section is sewn to a hardback binding. Today, in the glued books, the backs are lopped off, and of these sections that are folded together, they're still folded, but then the back is lopped off and the whole edges of the pages are glued. That's not what used to happen. You would have something that is like 2 sheets large, or it would have like a kind of pasted on joining piece, because a lot of times it was really hard to get some animals large enough. Larger pieces of parchment were more expensive. So you'd have a glued piece that would attach the two together and make one larger sheet. And then they would fold into kind of booklets, and you would stack these little booklets side by side together to make a larger codex. The text continued across the booklets from one to the next. It's not like, oh, this is one book about one thing, this is one book about another thing. No, this is how books were produced. Each section was sewn together to the back of the binding. And that is how codices were produced. So each one of these little booklets is called a quire. And each of these quires were reused as a unit between the lower text and the upper text. So what they would do whenever they were like, oh, we don't want to use this text anymore, we need to have it in the Uthmanic order. And because we need to have it in this order, it's not good enough just to scratch out the little bits that are different and replace them. we need to redo the whole thing because the surahs are in the wrong order. So wash and scrape one of these booklets at a time and then rewrite over it. In some cases, the page order of individual pages were kept intact. And in other cases, pages within one choir, within one booklet, would get shuffled around. So this, by looking at the upper text and seeing what parts of a choir are missing from the upper text, we can figure out how much of the lower text should have been there as well, because they were reused as units. And because the upper text is much easier to read, then it's much easier to do this with. So this is her reconstruction of the order according to the upper text, but the number of pages that would correspond to both the upper and the lower text. If it is, and this is not, some pieces were so fragmentary that a choir for them could not be reconstructed. These are just the ones with the better, they're more intact, they're larger, there's more than one folio, more than one sheet in each of these choirs, so that you can figure out in a very robust way what the rest of the text that is missing from this set is. So this is not everything, but this is showing internally to what we have now some things that are missing. So here is her reconstruction with the order. And if you zoom into hers, every single page is identified with its unique numbering system and how they fit in within the choir in the upper text to make up a section of the book. Mm-hmm. So everything that is a light colored and doesn't have a text, sometimes it's easier to tell that it just doesn't have tiny text written on it. Like in choir 1, there's only one sheet, one folio that's missing. In choir 2, nothing's missing. But you can tell what got completely destroyed and is not surviving at all among what survives. You go to choir 4 and there are only 3 sheets that have survived. And choir 5, it is 2, 3, 4, 5 sheets. 5 sheets have survived out of 10. Different ones have different amounts. And she was able to determine that this was kind of a not really fantastically well produced book to begin with.
Well, I mean, which is what you would expect, right? I mean,
well, for them, yeah, because they're primitive. These are people who are not putting the same number of lines on each sheet the way better copyists would. So
right, and early biblical manuscripts are going to be the same, that they're mostly not produced by professional scribes, and they're of low quality in comparison to a professional scribe's work. So that's not a weird thing, right? I'm just pointing out
it's not weird.
That's to be expected.
Yep. I mean, these are people who it would be weird if these people had been literate for a long time and they're suddenly producing kind of subpar work. If these were an illiterate group of people adopting a foreign technology and they aren't all that swift at it yet, then it would be expected. And this is the pattern that we see.
And I would say
is consistent with that.
Under the thesis that this is being created wholesale by a powerful empire, it would be kind of weird that they produced low quality manuscripts, so to speak. Yeah, you would expect them to employ professional scribes in that case. Interesting how even little things are inconsistent with the idea that this is created in some sort of conspiracy. I don't mean that in an offensive way. That's just the accurate term for the proposal, is that there was a conspiracy by the government to produce this document that didn't originate from where they claimed it did.
Right. This would be extremely weird if it came out of Syria. Not at all weird if they are a Hijazi origin group. Here are a number of other choirs with what has been reconstructed of them. And she has also gone so far as to, I don't know whether I have it. Nope, she doesn't have it. To place a few of them and talk about the order of the undertext within the choir. And here she explains some very small explanation as to why she's doing this, the choices that she's making and her suppositions about some of the choirs being different lengths than others, et cetera, et cetera. So then she says the sequence of the choirs from the primary to the secondary codex. So from the stuff that was erased to the later stuff. The tables reveal that several consecutive textual sequences of the upper text are also adjacent in the lower text. This would confirm Puig's hypothesis that the choirs of the primary codex remained more or less bound together before they were dismembered choir by choir. This explains why the leaves from the same original choir were reused together within the same choir in the secondary codex, sometimes in the same sequence. So again,
so let me just let me give an analogy, which isn't like strictly speaking correct, but basically you have a book, the binding's breaking, right? It's becoming unusable, but the pages are not like individually separated from the binding, and then you decide to reuse that paper, you just naturally reuse it in the same order. Basically, that's the idea here.
Well, you reuse the sets in the same order. You pull out one booklet, and this one wasn't
right
when it was first. This was not coming apart when it was first reused. It was deliberately ripped apart. But as you rip it apart, you rip apart one booklet, you prep that booklet, you use that booklet, and you don't pay that much attention to whether or not the booklet is in like the same order internally. But sometimes it is.
Right. You're not trying to make it the same order, but for the most part, there's no reason for it to get in a different order. So it would be in approximately the same order, but not necessarily exactly.
Right. So from these choirs, note that not all the surviving folios could be placed within them. 13 couldn't be placed in a choir at all because too little of it survives. From these alone, actually, it's 15 total could not be placed. I don't know why I said 13. From these alone, these choirs, when completed, would have been around these choirs alone. That would have been about 35% of the Quran's text from my guesstimation. So here is her 40 folios. She actually only has 35 from the Sanaa mosque. So maybe it's 40. Maybe that is the correct number. But and here is what she sees from those particular sections. The order is more similar to the reported order of Ubay and Ibn Masud's codices than the Uthmanic, but is identical to none. And here she compares what the Quranic order of the lower text was to the reported order of Ubay and Ibn Masud. So she starts out with what was the order of the lower text and what is the reported order of Ibn Masud and reported order of Ubay, according to two different scholars who reported separately. They often report the same thing, but there are sometimes small differences. Like Ibn al-Nadim or Nadim missed a bunch of surahs, and then al-Suyuti just missed one of them. And we do not need to go over this. If you are really interested in that, knock this
you
out.
can go through the tiny details there.
But the bottom line is it is similar to Ubay's order and Ibn Masud's order, but it is not identical to either one. That is the bottom line.
Yeah. So let me just be clear for the audience. This is known. This is a known fact from before the Sanaa manuscript was discovered, that there was different ideas of how to order the surahs of the Quran. If you go and look at Islamic QA, you'll probably in fact find them telling you exactly that much. Probably like 2% of Muslims are aware of this. It's not a well-known fact, by any means. Most Muslims have in their mind that the order of the surahs was ordained by Allah. But in fact, that is not the case. The consensus of Islamic scholars from throughout Islamic history is that in a few cases, Allah said this surah comes before that surah, or Muhammad said this surah comes before that surah. But for the most part, the surahs were just organized in a, to them, logical fashion, from longest to shortest.
Groups of surahs Muhammad liked to recite together in a particular order. And Ubay and Ibn Masud thought that this was super important. A lot of this was not emphasized in the Uthmanic and that codex. And that is one of the reasons why Ubay and Ibn Masud, because theirs is actually in some ways more similar to each other than to the Uthmanic one. So they could be in much more agreement. But
my point was that this isn't like some grand revelation to people actually knowledgeable about the Quranic history.
Yes.
That surahs would be in different orders, even if 98% of Muslims you encounter would have no idea this existed in their own history.
Right. I mean, Ibn Masud and Ubay thought that this was quite important because they thought that, Muhammad wanted certain groups together in certain orders. They wanted certain groups in certain orders, and the Uthmanic text does not do that. So they think that it's important. The Caliphate does not. So
Allah said, how is that a logical way to arrange them? I think it has something to do with the, and being able to ensure are copied correctly scribally. I'm not quite sure exactly, but it is a common system used in the ancient world, longest to shortest.
Yeah, it's a common system used. I just don't know why.
I think it might have something to do with making sure the scribe it kind of acts as a check for the scribe to see if they copied it correct. I'm not sure why.
Yeah,
it is common. It's not something that Muhammad's followers invented.
So again, we're back to the what's in it. So this is portions with 4 complete surahs. These are shorter ones, obviously, but there are portions of 35 total in here, and it's roughly a fifth. You can argue over whether or not certain verses ought to count if so little of it is being able to be seen in some cases. In other cases, it's very clear what every single the full word form is very clear. It varies. Now, to conclude this stream, to clear up what is in them, I am going to actually read a big chunk that is approximately 30 verses so that people are it's 33 verses that are in order, well preserved, so that people understand the kinds of variants that there are. In some cases, that I have taken the 1924 Huff's translation from Arbery, but I had to sometimes alter Arbery to even show the variants, because a lot of times they're so small they get lost in translation. Like it's just not there. Like the word that got changed wasn't there. So any place that I differ from Arbery over on the right, it's because I had to change it to even show the variant. It would not be there.
All right, so before you read that, let me take the questions from the audience, because obviously this will take a little while to go through it.
Yes.
But I also want to explain why we're doing this, because if you hear a correct statement that has more variants than the upper text or than a typical Quranic manuscript, it's a true statement, but it's probably not going to give you the right impression on the level of variance, because there's certainly a very common and understandable idea that this is a completely different text that has maybe the ideas that are found in the Quran, but is not all that similar on a word by word basis. And that's simply not the case. And reading through the example will show that. But I want to take 3 questions or 3 comments first. Quran itself or any archaeological evidence does not tell us who the author was. I'm assuming reads the answers, rejects the divine origin for the book. Absolutely. The Quran does not come from Allah.
And it comes from a raving maniac in the desert who thought he was giving verse by these verses, by the way, aren't really supposed to match the 1924 Hafs as much as they're supposed to match the Torah and the Injil. They're supposed to match word for word, but in a different language. So at least thought for thought, what the Jews and Christians have, but Allah is revealing another language. So as we are comparing these two, also compare them to our scripture and see if that's true.
And then we got from Preston here. It's up to Methodists to show evidence he wasn't real. The claim made by every document we have is that Muhammad, was real. Indeed, right? You can't just sit there and reject everything and then act like you have a theory. You actually need to provide positive evidence for your theory, and that's a challenge we've put out there. Artemis, what's your opinion about it? She says, meow, 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 meow. Super or gifted membership from Jack Ray.
Sir, how can we contribute financially for your organization? They get in touch with me. And very easy, people know where I am. And once they get in touch with me to contribute without causing problem, to contribute in big amounts. And many people call me for lunch and for dinner and for meal. And for every meal, they give big amounts, alhamdulillah. So those who really want to contribute, they come and meet me.
Thank you for your big amount of contributions, Jack Array. One
And
gifted
keep in
membership
mind
today.
that Thaddeus is absolutely terrible at letting people know this, but this is his full-time job now because he was fired from his job. So please, if you can, please support him. Patreon, YouTube gifts, Patreon, subscriptions, Subscribestar. Please support him so that he can continue doing this, because it's important to make sure that we're speaking accurately and that we are representing a coherent position in a responsible way. Saying things that are just clearly not true to the first person who looks at Halali after saying Halali found this would go, no, she didn't. Why is he saying something that isn't what she said? This is a big deal because of the number of people he's teaching to say wrong things. Fortunately, most people won't remember anything that he said in one presentation, and but still, it's not good that he's running around telling people to say these things that are so obviously.
Yeah, and it's more than just the details being wrong, right? He's also giving a vastly inaccurate perception of the reality behind those details.
And he said that, you know, the impression that he's leaving you is that these are vastly different texts, that this could be anything, that this isn't Quran, that this is something else, that this could be representative of some other group than proto-Muslims. Now, I'm going to ask you, as I read this, does this sound like something other than the Quran? Is this some kind of thing from which Quran was drawn, or is this just the Quran with the ideas of the Quran coming from its creator, whoever that is? So I will point out all the differences. I will not read through it in a laborious way. I will read through it really quickly and I'll point out the differences.
I just want to thank Mary for pointing that out. The streams that are about Muhammad hijab or some other cultural item will naturally get many more views. And, you know, as Mary said, this is my full-time job. I want to do streams like this. I think streams like this are super important. So if you think streams like this are super important as well, do consider supporting financially, because financial supporters get more say over what the content will be going forward than people who are not. I'm not saying that I ignore other people. I'm just saying you could buy some influence.
So Quran Only fans had a good question. I have pretty much ignored Halali's thesis that this was some sort of scribal scroll taking notes because it's so stupid. This is an absolutely
garbage,
moronic statement from the beginning. No one is having scribes practice on parchment, period. That's just a stupid position. These were made into quires. It was sewn into a book. This is just absolutely absurdly ridiculous to say that this is not Quran, that this is some sort of the differences are because it's a no. This was a Quran that was used by a mosque as its main text. This was a large, important, impressive book at the time. The fact that it was not done with the most supreme amounts of skill, like the handwriting is actually very, very good and very consistent. The lack of skill comes from like the technical aspects of book production that is more than it's technical knowledge. It's technology and mastery of technology. It isn't like handwriting level skills. The scribe was as skilled as one would expect one to be in handwriting. It's other places where the lack of professionalism shines through and the inconsistencies. So
before you go into that, Carol said it was Shabir Ali's conjecture. Shabir Ali probably repeated it, but no, it is indeed actually the original proposal. And to Jay's credit, this is one thing that he got absolutely correct when he was describing her work in other places. Says that she's kind of forced into that conclusion because of where the funding's coming from. It's not a tenable position at all, right? You're not having students use parchment, as Mary explained there. So Jay's right about that point, but he's wrong about the much more important points. And then last thing before we go on, Kargaku said, in any crime, the judge decides circumstantial evidence using one thing, motive. Okay, that's false, first of all.
no.
You don't decide circumstantial evidence only by motive. You have many
No.
factors you take into consideration. And then also, how do you think this helps your case exactly? That there's nothing inconsistent about the motive of someone claiming to be a prophet, people believing in him and waging war because he says you'll get booty for war, and then spreading that message as a result. There's nothing inconsistent with the standard narrative as far as motive goes. So
Correct.
I don't know what your point was at all.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and go into reading this. I want you to keep in mind two things. Does it sound like Quran or something else? Also, does this correspond directly to the gospel and the Torah as Muhammad was running around saying it would? So he begins, and slay them wherever you come upon them, expel them from where they expelled you. Persecution is more grievous than slaying, but fight them not by the holy mosque until they should fight you there. Then if they fight you, slay them. Such is the recompense of unbelievers. But if they give over, surely Allah is all forgiving, all compassionate. Fight them till there is no persecution, and all the religion is Allah's. And the original, or in the Hafs, it says, and the religion. It doesn't say all the religion is Allah's. Then if they give over, then there shall be no enmity, save for evildoers. The holy month is for the holy month. Holy things demand retaliation. And in the original, it was so, but it was the fa rather than the thumma. So it's the one that can either be translated as so or and. And whoso commits aggression against you, do you commit aggression against him, like as he has committed against you, and fear you Allah, and know that Allah is with the God-fearing. So this is all about killing people in the name of Allah and killing everyone around the mosque who have thrown you out. You have been thrown out from the mosque. Slay the people who have thrown you out from the holy mosque. So you need to have a mosque already. You need to have the Masjid al-Haram. You need to have people thrown out from it. And you need to have them killing people, being ordered to kill the people who threw them out unless they surrender. And expend in the way of Allah, that's always in jihad and the Quran, and cast not yourselves by your own hands into destruction, but be good do-gooders. Allah loves the do-gooders. Oh, and before I go on, the 4 typos I leave out are things like an extra letter in a word that can't really be shown in English. They are just clear writing mistakes. I put typos because obviously this is handwritten, but it is at the level of typo, cannot be explained by anything except a typo. Okay, so here's the one with the huge amount of differences, okay? Fulfill the pilgrimage and the visitation upon Allah. That's the Hajj, and unto Allah. That's the Hajj and the Umrah. do the Hajj and the Umrah. So this is in this early manuscript. But if you're prevented, then do such offering as was easier. And in the Hafs, it's like is made easy for you is kind of the idea. It becomes easy. It's a different form of the same verb. And shave not versus and shave not your heads till the offering reaches its place of sacrifice. If one of you is sick versus if someone of you is sick. So a number versus the word for someone, somebody, if somebody is sick, or injured in his head, then redemption by fast. And the Hafs, it has then redemption by fast. There's an extra word. Or free will offering, which is missing from the Sanaa, or ritual sacrifice. That's sakada. So you don't have charity in the Sanaa. It got dropped or was added later. Huge difference here.
Well, I mean,
sacrifice.
You could argue, right? So a textual critic, you know, there might be other factors that would take into consideration, but just based on this, you'd say almost certainly the or free will offering or ritual sacrifice is an interpolation to clarify the verse or make it in line with theology found elsewhere that probably wasn't original.
Well, the thing is, very often these three appear in order in other places. So this would have been
right. So, and that would be a good
like
reason. That'd be a good reason why a scribe would add it there. Maybe they're thinking about what the text is supposed to say. So even though they're looking at a copy that doesn't say that, they're like, oh, it's supposed to say that, and they put it all in. So the sacrifice is probably original, but this is a normal type of textual variant.
Yes,
is my point.
When you are secure, then whosoever enjoys the Umrah until the Hajj, then offer whatever was easier versus whatever becomes easy or like is made easy for you. Or if he finds none, then a fast of 3 days in the Hajj, and of 7 when you return. That is 10 completely. That is for him whose family are not present at the holy mosque. And fear Allah and know that Allah is terrible in retribution. So the same general ideas, some differences that are meaningful to Sharia, but the same general idea. For the historian, it's the same thing. For the Muslim, there's some troubling differences. All right.
Right.
There
might be some doctrinal issues here. We're not saying there aren't. But as far as, is this a different text? The question is clearly no. Or the answer, I mean, is clearly no.
So the Hajj is in months well known. I think it's really funny that he doesn't even bother to tell you when the Hajj is, because of course he's speaking to people who are around him, who for them it is well known. So he doesn't need to say.
That's pretty odd for odd for Allah to say.
It's really odd for Allah to say that. Yes. He's like, everybody knows what it is, when really only these pagans know when it is. The Hajj is
well, and certainly like under the Muslim paradigm, sorry to get off track here, but under the Muslim paradigm, right? At some point, Allah reveals this for the first time, even if Muhammad isn't the first person he revealed it to. Someone was the first person he revealed it to. So, and thus the Hajj didn't exist before he revealed it. So how can it be in months well known? All right.
Yeah.
Back to the actual subject.
So whoso undertakes the duty of Hajj and them shall not go to his womenfolk nor indulge in them in the month. Shall not go to his womenfolk nor indulge in ungodliness and disputing in the Hajj. Whatever good you work versus whatever good you do. Now, this work is a synonym for do. I just had put in something different to show that they were synonyms. They're spelled differently. Allah knows it, and take provision, but the best provision is God-fearing. So fear you me, men possessed of minds, which always cracks me up. It is no fault in you that you should seek bounty from your Lord, but when you press on from Arafat, then remember Allah at the holy waymark, and remember him as he has guided you, though formerly you were gone astray. So he's talking, you guys used to be pagans, gone astray, are people on the wrong path, the people who were in ignorance. And now he's talking to everyone. Formerly, you guys, you were all you guys were all pagans before. Again, very odd thing for Allah to say eternally to all the people reading this, but whatever. Then press on from where the people press on and pray for Allah's forgiveness. Allah is all forgiving, all compassionate. And when you have performed your holy rites, remember Allah as you remember your fathers, or yet more devoutly. So, yeah. And again, this refers to a pagan practice of remembering one's fathers, because there was this pagan idea that the memory needed to be kept alive for like them to continue to have benefits in the afterlife, such as it is. Not really resurrection, but kind of this underworldly existence. They need to be remembered. So this one cracks me up, because it's like, remember Allah as you remember your fathers, or yet more devoutly. Now some men there are who say, "Oh Lord, give to us in this worldly life," versus "give to us in this world," such as him shall have no part in this world to come. The Uthmanic is actually supposed to be as them, but Hafs actually agrees with the Sanaa here against other Uthmanic versions. So I couldn't really show that
I was
very
like,
well.
they both say as him,
Yeah.
Mary. What are you talking about?
And yeah. So
What
unless
you're saying is that most of the Arabic Qurans say as them,
Yeah.
but Hafs
Well-
happens to be in the minority with as him.
I did not double check this, but that's what Sadiki said. Unless he got the wrong verse, that's what it is. In there somewhere, there is an as him that should be an as them, and he said it was this verse, and this was the only place I could find one. But in the Hafs, it's as him as well. So I'm unless he got the verse wrong and it's some other place. Because I did find one place where they did type they made in their paper that I'm taking this from. I am integrating things from a paper into this to give this to you in this nice form. There is one place where he got the verse number wrong and just mistyped it, and I had to find the correct verse and make the alteration there. So it's possible.
Yeah, I will say that them would make more sense in context, because him is a little too specific when it's because it seems to be referring to a group of people. So
yeah, there are those. Yeah.
Basically, there's one group that Allah blesses,
well,
and one
the
group
men
that
is
rejects it.
plural. The men is plural. So anyway,
Right.
And others there are who say, "Our Lord, give to us in this world and the world to come, and guard us against the chastisement of the fire." And the Uthmanic is give to us in this world good. Give us good in this world and good in the world to come. The Sanaa does not specify which. Again, this one points very strongly to the Sanaa being original, because you're having this clarifying thing. What are you supposed to be asking for? Well, you're supposed to be asking for good, not just whatever, right?
Right.
So that is strongly indicative that this particular verse, the Sanaa, represents the original.
I would agree.
They shall have a portion from what they have earned, and Allah is swift at the reckoning. And remember Allah during certain days numbered. Again, no clarification as to which ones. Why? Because this is a guy wandering around, a pagan wandering around in the wilderness, right? If any man hastens on in 2 days, there's no sin on him. If any delays, it does not sin in him. If he be God-fearing, and fear you Allah, and know that unto him you shall be mustered. And some men there are who saying upon this present world pleases thee, and it's this rather than the present world. And such a one calls on Allah to witness what is in heart, yet he's most stubborn in altercation. And when he turns his back, he hastens about the earth to do corruption and destroy the tillage and the stock. And Allah loves not corruption, except apparently when he corrupts the Injil and the Torah, since this is not in the Injil and the Torah as it's supposed to be. So, and when it is said to him, fear Allah, vainglory seizes him in his sins, so Gehenna shall be enough for him. How evil a cradling. But other men there are that sell themselves, desiring Allah's good pleasure, and Allah is gentle with his servants. O believers, enter the peace, all of you, and follow not the steps of Shaitan. He is a manifest foe to you. But if you slip after guidance has come to you, know then that Allah is the Almighty, All-Wise. And then in Hafs, what you have is after the clear signs have come to you. And this is a theological point. Who has the guidance? Does everybody who hears hear these words of Allah have guidance?
No, because Allah will guide some and misguide some.
Right, but they do all have the clear signs. So again, I'm very, very on the side of the Sanaa being the original here. The Sanaa does have certain things that are like oopsies in it. It has more oopsies than most Uthmanic texts do, but it's also earlier. So that's to be understood. I think that this is the original form because
that makes sense.
It's
right. Again, there's always multiple factors that can be debated, but one of the principles is, which one has the more difficult to explain theology in light of, or the words in light of theology, and that's certainly the Sanaa manuscript. Yep.
And this would be it. And what do they look for? But that Allah should come to you versus them in the cloud, shadows, and the angels. And you could very likely be a typo because it doesn't really make, well, I guess it does make sense because Allah should come. Why are they looking for angels coming to you? But the matter is determined, and unto Allah all matters are returned. So could be other.
Yeah, and keep in mind that in Arabic it's super easy to change the you to them because it's a different form of the noun or verb or whatever.
Well, it's just the added the ending. It's one letter at the end, basically.
Right, yeah.
One or two letters.
Often one letter, right? Often one letter different. So very easy to accidentally change. This one, them could easily be the original.
Right. Ask the children of Israel how many clear signs we gave to them. Whoso changed Allah's blessing after it's come to him, Allah is terrible in retribution. Decked out fair to the unbelievers is the present life, and they deride the believers. But but those who were God-fearing shall be above them on the resurrection day, and Allah provides whomever he will without reckoning. So otherwise, he gives no justice to those that he chooses not to give justice to because he's forgiving them. That's what it's saying. The people were one nation. And this is theologically important because it's about the books, right? And then the sent forth and sent out, those are basically synonymous terms. And I had to show the difference in some way. Then Allah sent forth the prophets, good tidings to bear and warning, and he sent down with them the book with the truth, that he might decide between the people touching their differences. And only those who had been given it were at variance upon it after the clear sides came to them. And then the Hafs has an entire phrase that gets skipped here. Could just be accidentally skipped. Being insolent to one another. Then Allah guided those who believed to the truth, touching which they were at variance by his leave, and Allah guides whoever he will to a straight path. So the point is that the only reason, Hafs actually is a clarifying phrase, so that actually points to it being
this one definitely could go either way because it is not unheard of for scribes to accidentally skip words or phrases. So it could go either way. The more theological or clarifying importance the phrase is, the more likely it is to be late.
Because this one is explaining why are they at variance after things are sent to them? Why do they disagree? If everybody has the book, why are they disagreeing? And it's only because of their insolence is what the Hafs is explaining, that it is the same book, but they're not listening to it. They're not obeying it. They're being insolent. They're stirring up trouble. They're being divisive for no reason because they have the signs and they're in agreement, but they're doing it out of insolence. And they were at variance over it because Allah allowed their insolence to allow them to separate into groups. And then Allah will only guide whomever he wills to the straight path. And the others, even though they have the book of Allah, they're not going to be guided. That's what it's saying. Even though they have the book, even though they're only disagreeing because they're bad people, it's because Allah is not guiding them. And
So
this is
there's a
not,
quick question here from Lambert whether this is about the last day.
this portion is not. The previous portion is that the believers will be above the unbelievers on the last day was. This is about all the people who
Yeah,
already
and
have the
obviously I don't know which part
Yeah.
he was referring to because he just said is that, but there you go. So the previous, yes,
No,
but no
no.
longer.
It's saying that the thing about remember, he changes subjects like every 5 minutes. The angels
Yeah.
is about people were telling Muhammad, like, why don't we see signs? Why don't we see miracles? Why don't we ever see Jibreel? Why don't we see an angel coming to you? If we're supposed to believe that you're hearing from God, why do we have no evidence of it? And they talk about the angel. Why have we not seen the angel?
Gotcha.
So he says, do you suppose that you should enter paradise without there had come upon you the like of that who were before you? And the other one is those who passed before you. The were actually lacks any verb. You don't necessarily need a connecting verb. Past is an actual verb that things occurred before you, right? They were afflicted by misery and hardship, and so were convulsed that the messenger and those who believed with him said, when comes Allah's help? Ah, but surely Allah's help is nigh. So basically, the reason you're having hardship now is because you're just like the previous people. Don't worry about it. They will question thee concerning what they should expend. And this is another point or they question thee is actually, Muhammad is actually reacting in real time to questions that are being given to him by the people around him because Allah did not anticipate this somehow. So they question you.
But Mary, he did anticipate it. That's why he even said the people are questioning you.
Yep.
Then you know that it was his predetermined word, and he just knew that this event would take place and waited till the right time to reveal it.
Yep. So they will question thee concerning what they do question. Arbery's making this sound a lot nicer than it is. It's actually, they do question thee concerning what they should expend. Say, whatever so good you spend is for parents and kidsmen, orphans, the needy, and the traveler, and whatever good you do, Allah has knowledge of it. Basically, what counts as sadaqah? What is a virtuous expense for sadaqah? Because they're like, hey, if we let our parents starve and give this to Allah, is that good? He's like, no, you can spend it on your parents and it still counts as sadaqah. That's what they're saying. So you can spend on orphans, you can spend on your own parents, you can spend on your poor relatives, and it will still count as a good deed for you. Don't worry about it. We're getting near the end. Prescribed for you is the fighting, although it be hateful to you. Oh, so jihad is prescribed to you in this text. This is not some proto-Christian text, guys. I just want to be clear. This is not a Syriac hymn to God that got slightly different vowels that made it say this. No, this is what it says. Yet it may happen that you will hate such a thing which is better for you, and it may happen that you will love a thing that is worse for you. Allah knows, and you do not know. So do jihad. It's good for you, even though you hate it. They will question thee concerning the holy month and about fighting in it versus fighting in it. Hafs has the fighting in it, and that one points to Hafs being the original because it is less grammatically.
Yeah, it's a clarifying grammatical thing, but doesn't change the meaning.
Yep, but this points to Hafs being the more awkward original in this case. Fighting in it is a heinous thing, but to bar from Allah's way and the holy mosque, and this one has an extra word in it, which actually doesn't really fit in, the extra phrase, but to bar from Allah's way and disbelief in him and the holy mosque, that makes no sense because you're barring from Allah's way and the holy mosque. Like the verb is barring involves
right.
Allah's way.
So in this case,
disbelief in him.
In this case, it's hard to
weird.
explain why that would have been added even by accident. So it's more likely to be original.
Well, I think it was added because they're trying to say that disbelief in him is another thing that's heinous, but it's just shoved in awkwardly. I don't think that there's any way that someone could have said this sentence with that
Fair
in
enough.
it in the
Fair
first
enough.
place. It's too odd. Because they're just trying to throw in kufr into the list of evil things, and they do it awkwardly. And to expel its people from it, that is more heinous in Allah's sight, and persecution is more heinous than slaying, meaning the persecution of Muhammad. So it's cool for Muhammad to kill people, because whenever people make him feel bad and don't let him rule his mosque in Mecca, then they should be killed. They will not cease to fight with you till they turn you if they are able. And here it clarifies, turn you from your religion if they are able.
Mhm.
And whosoever of you turns from his religion, and here's the clarifying bit that gets projected back into the Sanaa, and dies disbelieving, their works have failed this world and the next, and those are the inhabitants of the fire, therein they shall dwell forever.
Mhm.
But the believers and those who immigrate in Allah's way, and the other one says, who immigrate and struggle in Allah's way. The reason why you would change this, because in Allah's way always means jihad, and immigrate in Allah's way is just kind of a weird phrase. So you add in and struggle to clarify that they mean like do jihad explicitly, like immigration itself is not jihad, but it's immigrate in Allah's way, meaning immigrate for the
Europe
purpose
might
of jihad.
disagree with that, but anyway.
Yeah. Well, yeah, struggle in Allah's way could be the original, because the normal phrase is struggle in Allah's way. That is true. But in Allah's way appears in a bunch of times where it means jihad without, like, that you give in Allah's way is a frequent phrase that means you give for jihad, even though it never says the word jihad there. Anyway.
I was just saying that,
yeah,
people could argue that immigration is itself jihad, but that's neither here nor there. I agree that the emigrate by itself is probably more likely to be original,
because it's definitely the harder reading. Those have hope of Allah's compassion, and Allah is all forgiving, all compassionate. They will question thee concerning wine and arrow shuffling, say, in both is heinous sin and uses for men, and it's a benefit is actually what it says. It has heinous sin and benefits for men, but the sin in them is more heinous than the benefit, which is kind of hilarious. They will question thee concerning
it's a scientific miracle, according to Nadir.
Yeah. So they should expend. That means expend in the way of Allah, expend in jihad, and say the abundance. So above what you need to survive, you should give. So Allah makes his clear his sign to you versus his signs to you. Perhaps you will reflect. In this world and the world to come, they will question thee concerning the orphans, say, to set their affairs aright is good, and if you intermix with them, they are their brothers. Allah knows well him who works corruption from him who sets aright, and he has will, and had he willed, he would have harassed you. Surely Allah is almighty, all wise. So there's their brothers versus your brothers. If you intermix with them, they are their brothers. That just makes no sense. It's almost certainly a typo. If you intermix with them, they are your brothers. Hafs here is almost certainly what it should be. It's just, the thing is, you just finished writing like they are, so you're like continuing on. It's a very understandable mistake. Do not marry idolatresses until they believe. A believing slave girl is better than an idolatress, though you may admire her. And do not marry idolaters until they believe. A believing slave is better than an idolater, though you may admire him. Those call into the fire, and Allah calls into paradise, and pardon, and he makes clear signs to the people. And pardon by his leave is the other one. So he is pardoning by his own permission. It's actually...
Yeah, I mean, that's about as clear as it comes from a text critical standpoint of an interpolation. Right,
well,
because you disagree?
Again, this is one that you might pull out because you're like saying that Allah is pardoning by his own permission. By his leave is something that just gets kind of reflexively shoved in there in various times by Muhammad. And so this may be a place where he put it in and people are like, that he could miss, but that makes no sense. So
I
could go
stand
either way.
corrected because I was
Right.
assuming this was a human being, but you're
No.
right. In context, it's God that's doing it. In
Right.
which case, it's much more awkward to say by his leave.
Yes. So that may be the original, and the Sanaa might have the
Yeah.
question.
So, or this one, I'm going to be on the fence because it is
Yeah.
also possible for a scribe to just like remember that it's supposed to be by his leave and put it in there when it wasn't there originally. That could go either way.
Right.
That one could go either way.
And he makes clear his signs to the people. Haply they will remember. Perhaps they will remember, is what it says. They will question, or they question thee concerning the monthly course. That's menstruation. Say, it is hurt. So it's an injury. Whenever women have menstruation, they are injured, by the way, according to Muhammad, which is untrue. Do not go to women during their menstruation, versus, so go apart from women during the monthly course and do not approach them. And then
So that one, I mean, it has the same meaning.
Yeah.
They're very different. I'm not sure which would be original, but they
No.
do have the same meaning. So
Yeah.
it's not that important.
And Muhammad could have just forgotten the exact wording from time to time. And
Right.
recited
He could have
different-
given it
That
different two
is-
different days. Yep.
Yes, and that is a source of a number of these variants. A number of variants are sourced from people just reciting, from Muhammad misremembering things on different days. And there's one that's really funny about the middle prayer and the Asr prayer, where one time he said middle and then he switched it to Asr. And then whenever he was called out, he went middle and Asr, but they're actually referring to the same thing. So when he did that, it was an obvious mistake. And most people covered over this, but his wives are kind of stupid. I guess that's why he married them, because no smart women would marry him. And they didn't get that the reason why other people were refusing to recite middle and Asr is because Muhammad embarrassed himself there and they're trying to cover it up. Anyway, when they have cleansed themselves and come unto them as Allah has commanded you, truly Allah loves those who repent and he loves those who cleanse themselves. So right here, he's anticipating that they're not even going to listen to him and they're going to have sex with him anyway. That's why he adds, Allah loves those who repent, which is really pathetic. So that is the end. The final question is, what is a companion codex? Like I've been saying.
Okay, so before,
yeah,
before you go on, I was waiting till after we did the
Yep.
text, but there was a couple
Let's
comments.
do that.
Dr. Kufar Phobia says you can bribe him. Obviously, that was tongue in cheek. I can't be bribed in an absolute sense. It was tongue in cheek. But, you know, if you want to see a particular topic covered, and it's a topic I have zero interest in, not going to help, but it could push it up in the priority, is what I'm saying. And he also said you should do a Q&A after teaching as it stretches live. We probably won't do one today. We'll probably like just have a dedicated Q&A. I want to keep these short so they can be, I mean, short, you know, and it definitely scare quotes there. But so that they're function as a reference, because a bunch of discussion afterwards isn't really helpful to a rewatcher. And then they'll see that the length is 5 hours and they'll be like, I don't got 5 hours, right? So we'll probably just have dedicated streams for Q&A. But don't worry, we're going to talk a lot about this. We'll have lots of opportunities for pushback.
Oh, and then there's a question, is this supposed to sound poetic? Now, this section really doesn't. It sounds about poetic in English as it does in Arabic. The endings rhyme of the different verses, but there's so many similar sounds in Arabic that that's not really any kind of feat. These are the lecturing portions when Muhammad had given up on trying to sound super poetic as he did in the beginning. The reason why it supposedly sounds wonderful is because they chanted in a sing-songy way, and they are impressed by that because they are told that it is beautiful, and you're brought up on this.
I mean, in fairness, it often is pleasant to the ears, but it's the skill of the person doing the performance, not some inherent property of the text.
Yeah, you could say anything in that way, and
right,
it
exactly,
would sound pretty. You can talk about killing people and mutilating their corpses, and that could sound pretty.
Well, yeah, I mean, Osama likes to say that when someone claims that the Arabic's so beautiful, like he'll since he's a native speaker of Arabic, he'll say something like, may your mother's bones be cursed with the fire of hell or something, and they'll be like, oh, that sounds so wonderful, thank you. And he'd be like, do you know what I said? right? I made up the exact words, but something really horrific, right? He'll say something really horrific to them, and then they'll be like, "That's so beautiful." I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah. So the final point is, what the heck is a companion codex? Now, Muhammad had very, very, very early on, Muhammad had no scribes. And that's whenever he would stand there supposedly wiggling his lips, trying to quote unquote remember everything that Jibril was telling him, or was trying to make up the entirety of the section of poem he wanted to give all at once in his head before saying it, and at the same time committing it to memory. He's trying to commit this to memory and was having a hard time. That's why you get abrogation introduced as a concept, that Allah will give you something better if you forget it. But pretty early on, he got scribes who would write stuff down. Now, why did Muhammad have his own scribes who were different than the other people who were writing it down for their own use? It would be for his use. He had it written for his own use. Now, the question is, why the heck wasn't that material used as a basis for a codex? First of all, it wasn't compiled entirely as a codex even then. And secondly, it was probably among what got eaten by the goat. The goat probably ate everything underneath her bed to the point where there was nothing usable left. And that would be Muhammad's codex that he would, and Aisha's is his favorite wife. She's the youngest, she's the dumbest. She'll just sit there and lap up whatever he said because she's been groomed since birth to just accept whatever he did. So he could come in there, he could study that, and then he could try to recite it word for word later. Sometimes the only way. So what Stephen Shoemaker's proven is that the only way you could come close to word by word perfection is by having a physical text to study. Yet he would not remember it perfectly from one recitation time to the next. So what would happen? People who were sitting there making their own copies, sometimes they would hear the words slightly differently. Sometimes he would say the words differently. Because if you're taking dictation, sometimes you'll replace things orally, just automatic memory lapses. But if you are, if he is reciting it from memory, then sometimes his memory wouldn't be good and he would say a different phrase. And this is what happened in the event of the Ahruf, where Muhammad, it's like 20 something years that he has been a prophet. He has been a prophet for like 21 years, and suddenly somebody's saying something in such a remarkably different way that Umar notices, freaks out, drags him from Muhammad. Muhammad's like, "Oh, it's okay. It's been revealed in a bunch of different ways that I failed to tell you for 20 entire years as I have been doing this nonsense." It is a made-up excuse to keep him from having to say, "I screwed up, taught you wrong," or telling someone that they're remembering wrong, even though they know they aren't, because they might resist him. So he just makes something up on the spot. So the companion codices,
usually he just gaslight people and just be like, "That's not the way I taught it to you." So
but
the fact that he didn't do that, it means that probably he was like, "Oh crap, they're gonna figure it out," right?
Mm-hmm.
So he came up with an excuse off the top of his head. Like, this guy has too much credibility. I need a different excuse than you remembered it wrong.
Yep. Because you remember it wrong would be his normal gaslighting. So he tried a different gaslight, which has confused everyone ever since because it makes no sense. It makes no sense. It has not been revealed in multiple dialects. It's only in Hijazi Arabic. It doesn't even rhyme correctly when you recite it in other ways. So no one who's reciting it today, because everyone recites it in a version of classical Arabic with little dialectical variants to make it sound cool and neat. But none of it is recited in Hijazi Arabic in a consistent way that preserves all the rhymes. There are places with broken rhymes because of how people say it. And that is significant. So there are issues because of this. So these companion codices are the private copies that people wrote on their own from Muhammad's recitation, and that they kept on their own and considered, because they had written them down from what Muhammad said, these are to them more reliable than anything else that somebody else brings to them that they have copied down. And that's why they have faith in them.
Mm-hmm. All right. Is that the last slide for today?
That is the last slide. So in conclusion,
Right.
this is Quran. It's not anything else. It is Quran. About a fifth of it is preserved. There is no reason to expect that there would be any dramatically different text in there somewhere as a woohoo surprise. What we should expect is that the general narrative of a companion codex and how these were developed and how these happened are true in the context of this false prophet who is trying to fool people, who said things slightly differently different times. And the variants, because all of this is entirely a human issue, these variants have repercussions in theology and in law. We've already seen one where if the Sanaa is the original, the current Islamic law is wrong. So just to be clear.
Mm-hmm. So we do have a new poll open. Do you like these serious in-depth teachings? Your choices are yes or no. I'm just here for the cats. I said no, I'm just here for the cats because if you don't like this kind of teaching and you're here, it's got to be for some reason. And the only logical conclusion is it's the cats. So, but basically, it's a joke because obviously, if you're here, you like in-depth teachings, right? Just a fun little poll, just a little fun little poll to close us out. If you have questions specific to the material presented today, go ahead and put those in the chat. Now, if you just have general questions about Mary's thesis of Islamic history and whatnot, we'll have a stream for that purpose. So questions about what the Sanaa Manuscript is, or about the variants we looked at today, or anything along those lines, go ahead and give those now. Otherwise, we'll close out in a bit, but we have been joined by the weird stuff. Go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, and Carol did ask, it might be a joke, but what about the Book of the Camel of God? Well, that would just be an alternative name for a surah, because the surah names are not like, they're not official names from Muhammad or Allah. They're just conventional names. And a number of them have multiple names to this day. So like, oh, I wonder, what is it called? Yeah, there are a bunch of times when the Camel of God is mentioned. One of those is going to have been called the Camel of God sometimes in the past.
Mm-hmm. Right, because they're just nicknames for the surahs. They're not ordained by God or Muhammad or whatever, right? So the fact that there is a reference that there was a book of the camel doesn't mean it is a surah of the camel, whatever. I don't know the word in the actual reference, but it doesn't mean that something has been lost. But that said, we do know some surahs have been lost. That doesn't mean that the surahs that we have are not, in fact, part of the original Quran either.
And
so,
from now reading everything, I think that the ones that were lost are ones that Muhammad told people to stop reciting.
Probably.
Ubay, Ibn Masud, between those two, they're the two surviving people who had full codices before Muhammad died. They would have had it had Muhammad not told them to stop reciting it. So I think that that's kind of significant. I'm really curious as to what's in the stuff Muhammad said to ditch.
Well, we know about the one very important verse about how Adam, even if he had a field of gold, he'd want 2 fields of gold, which is apparently one of Sajid's favorite Quran verses. He said it's such a beautiful verse. I love this verse, but it's not even part of the Quran. It's just from one of the hadith about how the surahs of the Quran were lost, and they remember that one line. But apparently it's a very beautiful line. Remember, let no one say he has memorized all of the Quran. Let him only say that he's memorized that of which he has. Welcome, Weird Stuff.
Hello, hello. Very nice presentation. God bless you. I didn't know anything about the Sanaa manuscript, like how actually it was. I did hear J. Smith, but I cannot take his word for it because he's not an expert. Let's put it this way. He did cite some of the experts, but seeing this presentation from Mary, it makes more sense, more in depth of what exactly is available at the moment. Can I take a little bit of like 2 more minutes, if I can, please, Thaddeus?
Yep.
Cargo crew said something about judges and the judicial system. There are 2 things that judges taking in court: direct evidence and circumstantial. That's the 2 evidences that they take. Direct is witness, a direct witness, someone that witnessed something. This is the most important thing that a judge will take. But in order to take into consideration the witness must go through questioning to see the trustworthiness of the witness. Just as happened to Mimi Jab, that the judge couldn't take him seriously because of his character, and he said he was lying. So anything that he would say, it was untrustworthy, right? So the same way, in any Western court you go, a direct witness, if he is untrustworthy, anything he says is for rubbish. You put it in the bin. The circumstantial evidence
One
are
quick thing on
everything else.
hang on on witness testimony. They will still take the witness testimony of liars. They'll just point out in court.
Yes,
Here's
yes.
what you said here. Here's why this is not possible. Here is what you have
Yes.
said here. Here is where you contradict yourself. So to be clear,
Yes.
they do take testimony of liars, but you really want to make it incredibly
But
clear.
yeah, but has very little weight.
But
Very
they
little weight.
discard
Right?
it. They discard the witness if he is untrustworthy. I mean, they won't take the witness testimony seriously. Okay.
Well, they hope
will
that the
say-
jury doesn't, if they have a jury,
Of
they
course.
present it to convince them
Of
not
course,
to take it seriously.
that's why you have 2 lawyers, the one that defends, the other one that accuses. That's why
Yep.
you have 2 lawyers. You don't have one. And the other evidence is circumstantial, and circumstantial is everything else apart from the witness. What that means is photography, DNA test, fingerprints, everything else are circumstantial. Why they're called circumstantial? Because let's say I committed a crime. I committed it, like, okay? And for some reason, where I committed crime, you see Thaddeus' fingerprints, but he was never there. You just find his fingerprints there. So why would you accuse Thaddeus of that crime, right? You can't.
Right.
So if
or
you-
or
Well,
even
it
better,
would be
you know I
because-
was there the previous day, right?
Right.
And thus you
Yeah.
have an explanation.
And to be clear,
And that's why it's circumstantial, because you know the
Yes.
fingerprints there, but you don't know why it's there.
and the direct
Exactly.
evidence is only
Exactly.
from living witnesses that you can cross-examine right now. It is not
Exactly.
recording
Eh,
of something somebody said. It's not other thing
Yes.
being that's all, and that's all circumstantial too. The
Yeah,
only
yeah.
so whenever you have people in the chat going, oh, but what about the court of law? Court of law doesn't deal with historical things because everybody's dead.
Exactly.
There is zero direct evidence because everybody's dead by default. Like everyone's dead.
But I mean, the
There
irony
can
though,
be,
Mary,
and yeah,
right?
exactly.
With people like Cargo Crew, but I mean, not just him. They're like, they take the written record and say that's circumstantial evidence. I want the direct evidence of archaeology, which is
Yeah, but
way
that's
more
circumstantial
circumstantial,
also.
right?
Yes,
It's also
massively
circumstantial, so
and
you cannot
massively
go
more
around it.
interpretive. Now, it can be incredibly useful to clarify things like, oh, well, this layout of the city is different than we thought. So when they say this, they mean that. We always thought it was like, that's really, really helpful. But archaeology alone kind of sucks. Even now with archaeology plus DNA, you can only say, well, you know, we have lots of Y DNA here that changed over. The mitochondrial DNA is mostly the same, and for some goofy reason they want to say that that doesn't indicate a conquest, but usually that's like exactly the thumbprints of a conquest, because again, they're imagining things rather than using historical records and going, okay, we have a historical record of a conquest. What happens after this? Oh, this is the normal pattern. All right, when we see this later, we should do this. But that would be reading things in light of, you start with history and then you add on other piece of evidence.
Mm-hmm.
To
Yeah,
the
yeah.
written record.
Archaeology, I mean, it has a purpose. It can clarify things, and it certainly can tell you what history often leaves out, which is like the day-to-day lifestyle of ordinary people, right? It can definitely provide information on that. But as far as like clarifying whether or not the conquest of Gaul was as Caesar described in his book describing it, archaeology is not going to help you out at all, right?
No,
Nope.
no. And what else did I want to say? I wanted to say how disappointed I am because you just crumbled my faith that the Quran was preserved word for word. I mean, really, why did you do that? You just destroyed this faith, you know?
Exactly. The takeaway here, right? The takeaway, despite some people like just getting mad, I mean, like, why are you supporting the Muslim position or whatever? The takeaway here isn't the Muslim position, right? The takeaway here is that the Quran is an early text connected to the historical figure of Muhammad, but like any other text, has scribal preservation issues. Sometimes interpolations, sometimes accidental word changes, sometimes deletions. And here's the issue, right? Do I think that most likely we could determine with a pretty high degree of confidence what the original text of the Quran is? Yes, I do think that. But I don't know that because the work hasn't been done, because Muslims want to push this perfect preservation, dot for dot, letter for letter, false narrative, and thus they're scared of textual criticism. By Muslims, I mean modern mainstream Muslims. Historically, they did actually do this.
Historically, if Al-Suyuti had this, he would have loved it. He would have been like, oh, here is a companion codex. Here are all the differences. Like, he would have, he scoured for references to these kind of variants that were well known.
Mm-hmm.
So,
all right. So,
how different is it, Thaddeus? How different is it 1,000 years ago, right? Let's say maybe not 1,000, 500 years ago, that the scholars of Islam would accept these differences in the text, and they wouldn't have any problem to mention them or to write them down to say, you see, in that recitation in this book, we have this difference between these two verses. But right now, because they push this stupid narrative of word for word, dot for dot, and bollocks like that, sorry for my language, they are afraid to get the Quran or the manuscripts, and the manuscripts actually, through scrutiny, through the grammatical scrutiny. They are afraid to do that.
And part of the issue is that the previous Muslims did know that this was a problem. They did know it was a problem. They did not think that all these readings were necessarily correct. They thought some of them were right and some of them were wrong. And the fact that they were arguing back and forth, they were aware that this was kind of a problem for themselves. But because they were off in their own little bubble, and they're like, oh, we are starting with the assumption that Islam is true, the implication of these problems that they saw in the text did not come and slap them on their faces, given what Muhammad said about his text, about what Allah said about his text. Nothing else. There should be certainty in Sharia. There should be certainty in theology. And there are differences in those things. That is a problem. And that should not exist if Islam were true. The scholars before thought that they could argue for one or the other, but you shouldn't have this type of difference. It shouldn't be there. So it's easier to just lie about it.
Yep. So yeah, that's the takeaway here. The Yasir Qadhi, at least when he's talking to a public audience, is lying. Jay is also mistaken. The Sanaa manuscript is not like some pre-Islamic Christian text or just a story that could be used by any religion or something along those lines. It is not only 63 verses, it's over 1,000 verses, roughly 20% of the total text of the Quran. It seems that no one will be completely happy, I guess, but that is the nature of historical reality. It usually doesn't fit anyone's ideal. It is what it is, right? You can take the reality of history and use that in your understanding of early Islam, or you can believe in the myth. You pick your myth, right? That Islam didn't exist, or that it's been perfectly preserved letter for letter since the time of Muhammad. Those are the myths. The truth is in the middle. Your final thoughts, weird stuff?
I'm still shocked by this discovery that it's not preserved word for word. So I don't have anything else to say.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Your final thoughts for today, Mary?
I have already expressed them. Join us next time that we go through this material, probably next Thursday, most likely, where we will be talking about what date is this. Now that we have established that this is a Quranic text, this is the Quran, that is the genre of the text. It's not some pre-whatever material that was compiled. It's Quran, just not perfect Quran in terms of matching the Hafs. When was it written? How do we know? We're going to talk all about dating, all about the radiocarbon dating, and something that everybody's missed and that I only got because I went back to the French text, that everybody's reporting something wrong. What they're reporting wrong clarifies a whole lot about the supposed differences in dates that are not nearly as different as people think they are. So,
Yep, absolutely. Got a couple thoughts to close out. One from Timothy Roy here. Also, defending the existence of a historical figure is in no way a defense for Islam. Yeah, guys, get this through your head that just because we are agreeing that Muhammad existed doesn't mean we're supporting Islam or the standard narrative, or that this comes from Allah or something along those lines. It's not an all or nothing proposition. The responsible thing to do is to evaluate the evidence. And the evidence is very strongly in favor of the historical reality that there was a man named Muhammad who claimed to be a prophet of God and led to the foundation of what we now call Islam. That doesn't mean Islam is true. It just means it has a historical origin. Jack Ray pointing out my Patreon there. So final reminder to everyone, your financial support is greatly appreciated. Either Patreon or PayPal or Subscribestar is more efficient, financially speaking, than a YouTube donations. Over the last few days, I've received a large donation, relatively speaking. I'm not talking like tens of thousands of dollars, but a relatively large donation via PayPal. Thank you to whoever that was. I know the name on the account, but I don't know your YouTube name, but thank you, whoever that was. Had 2 people sign up on Patreon. Thank you for those people who signed up there as well. I see it. I appreciate it. Obviously doesn't get a shout out on YouTube, but financially a larger percentage goes to me as opposed to the platform. So my sincere thank you to all those who are supporting this work. Tomorrow is the debate between between Jay Smith and Raymond Ibrahim on the subject of does the Muhammad as portrayed by Islam exist as a historical figure. That'll be on DCCI. Mary and I will react to that on Friday, at least part one of our reaction. May take multiple, don't know. Also tomorrow, earlier in the day, will be a new video from Mary, a scripted video, first time on this channel that she'll have a scripted video out. Not the first time she recorded it, to her credit, but the first time that I actually went through the effort of editing it for her. So that's all on me. That's all on me. But we'll have a scripted video by Mary on Islamic coins, on early coins. And as I said at the start of this, I think that a large percentage of Jay's argument ultimately is based on his interpretation of a single coin. And spoiler, there is a coin that utterly refutes him, that doesn't fit into his narrative whatsoever. The episode will be titled, or the video will be titled something along the lines of "This coin changes what you know about early Islam." Something along those lines will be the title of it. I haven't picked the exact title, but it'll be something along those lines. And you're going to see a coin that I don't know if Jay knows it exists or not, but he certainly doesn't expect you to know it exists, because it totally disproves his idea that the coins prove that Muhammad was a Christian title. All right. Thank you for joining us today. Got other things coming up, but that's enough of a preview for you guys. You know what we're doing the next couple days. Thank you for tuning in today. And again, thank you to the financial supporters. Until we meet again, everyone, God bless. And we'll close out with Pastor Jake.
Pray this ceaselessly. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me.